Welcome to Echoes of Ancient America. Tonight, we travel back to a North America that few people ever learn about in school. Long before European colonists arrived, and long before modern nations took shape, powerful kingdoms, chiefdoms, and confederacies ruled vast territories across the continent. These were not small, isolated villages hidden in the wilderness. They were organized societies led by influential rulers, supported by complex political systems, extensive trade networks, thriving agricultural economies, and carefully maintained alliances. Their leaders governed thousands of people, controlled important resources, directed ceremonies, negotiated with rivals, and shaped the course of regional history. Tonight, we'll explore the Kingdom of Coosa, one of the most powerful societies in the southeastern woodlands. We'll journey to the coastal realm of the Calusa, whose rulers commanded the waters of Florida without relying heavily on agriculture. We'll examine the rise of the Powhatan Confederacy and discover how dozens of communities united under a single political authority. Along the way, we'll visit the sacred world of the Natchez Chiefdom, uncover the leadership structures of the Mississippian world, explore the rulers who guided great cities such as Cahokia, and learn how diplomacy, warfare, and royal traditions helped maintain power across generations. Finally, we'll witness the gradual decline of these forgotten kingdoms as disease, conflict, environmental change, and European expansion transformed the continent forever. So settle in, relax, and allow the modern world to drift away as we journey into America's forgotten kingdoms. Let the rivers, forests, coastlines, and ancient capitals guide you gently into the past. And before we begin, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. Every story, every memory, and every place matters. And together we keep history alive. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, Segment 1, The Kingdom of Coosa, a powerful southeastern realm. As the first light of dawn spreads across the rolling hills, river valleys, and dense forests of the southeastern woodlands, a kingdom begins to awaken. Mist rises slowly from broad rivers, winding through fertile landscapes while smoke curls upward from clusters of homes arranged around open plazas. Farmers prepare for another day in the fields. Traders organize goods for upcoming journeys. Elders gather to discuss community matters. Messengers move along well. Traveled paths connecting distant settlements. At the center of this world stands one of the most influential and least remembered political powers in pre-Columbian North America, the Kingdom of Coosa. Today, few people have heard its name, yet centuries before European colonization transformed the continent, Coosa governed a vast network of communities stretching across portions of what are now Georgia, Alabama, and neighboring regions. It was not a kingdom in the European sense of castles, stone fortresses, or written royal decrees. Instead, it was a powerful, indigenous realm shaped by Mississippian traditions, agricultural prosperity, political alliances, and the authority of leaders whose influence extended across large portions of the southeastern landscape. To understand Coosa, imagine traveling through the region sometime during the 15th century. The forests are alive with movement. Deer move between trees. Canoes glide along rivers, serving as major transportation routes. Villages appear at regular intervals, connected through kinship, trade, diplomacy, and shared cultural traditions. These communities are not isolated. They participate in a broader political system centered upon powerful leadership and regional cooperation. At the heart of this network lies Coosa, a chiefdom so influential that later European explorers would describe it as one of the most important powers they encountered in the southeast. The rise of Coosa was closely tied to developments occurring across the Mississippian world. For centuries, agricultural societies throughout the southeast had cultivated crops such as corn, beans, and squash, supporting growing populations and increasingly complex political systems. Large ceremonial centers emerged. Trade networks expanded. Leaders gained authority. By organizing labor, maintaining alliances, and overseeing religious activities. Over time, some communities became regional centers, exerting influence over neighboring settlements. Coosa was one such center, but its influence eventually extended far beyond a single town. Through diplomacy, kinship ties, ceremonial obligations, and political authority, Coosa became the focal point of a larger realm encompassing numerous communities. Agriculture formed the foundation of this power. Fertile river valleys supported abundant harvests capable of feeding substantial populations. Fields stretched across the landscape, carefully managed through knowledge accumulated over generations. Reliable food supplies allowed communities to grow and supported individuals engaged in activities beyond farming. Artisans crafted pottery and tools. Traders traveled between regions. Religious leaders organized ceremonies. Political leaders coordinated relationships between settlements. Without agricultural productivity, such complexity would have been impossible. Every aspect of Coosa's political authority ultimately rested upon the labor of farmers cultivating the land. Settlements associated with Coosa reflected this prosperity. Houses surrounded central plazas where gatherings, ceremonies, and public events occurred. Earthen mounds often occupied prominent positions within communities. These structures served ceremonial, political, and symbolic purposes. Constructing them required significant labor, demonstrating the ability of leaders to organize collective efforts. From elevated positions atop mounds, rulers and ceremonial figures could address assembled populations, reinforcing authority while participating in public rituals. The landscape itself became a visible expression of political power. Trade further strengthened Coosa's position. The kingdom occupied a strategic location within broader southeastern exchange networks. Goods moved along rivers and trails connecting distant communities. Marine shells from coastal regions, copper from farther north, stone materials, and other valuable resources circulated through these networks. Participation in exchange brought wealth, prestige, and opportunities for diplomacy. Leaders could distribute valuable goods to strengthen alliances and reinforce loyalty. Trade, therefore, served political as well as economic functions. The authority of Coosa's rulers depended partly upon their ability to manage these relationships effectively. European accounts, although limited and influenced by outsider perspectives, provide some of the earliest written descriptions of Coosa. When the Spanish expedition led by Hernando de Soto entered the southeast during the 16th century, members of the expedition encountered Coosa and recognized its significance. They described a powerful chief exercising authority over multiple settlements. While their observations must be interpreted carefully, they confirm archaeological evidence indicating the existence of substantial political organization. To European observers accustomed to kingdoms and noble hierarchies, Coosa appeared as a major regional power. Yet the nature of leadership within Coosa differed from European models. Authority relied upon relationships, obligations, ceremonial legitimacy, and the ability to maintain social harmony. Leaders governed not through standing armies or written laws, but through networks of influence sustained across generations. Daily life within Coosa unfolded beneath this broader political structure. Most people were farmers, craftspeople, hunters, fishers, and community members carrying out responsibilities essential to collective well-being. Families worked fields, prepared food, constructed homes, and participated in ceremonies. Children learned skills from parents and elders, seasonal rhythms, guided activities. Yet even ordinary daily tasks connected individuals to larger political and cultural systems. Harvests supported regional centers. Ceremonies reinforced shared identities. Trade linked communities separated by considerable distances. The kingdom functioned because countless individuals contributed to its success. Religion and politics were closely intertwined. Leaders often derived authority not only from practical leadership, but also from ceremonial responsibilities. Sacred traditions reinforced social order and connected communities through shared beliefs. Legitimacy of leadership. Earthen mounds, plazas, and ceremonial spaces served as stages upon which political and spiritual life intersected. The power of Coosa therefore extended beyond material resources. It rested upon ideas regarding community, responsibility, ancestry, and the proper relationship between leaders and the people they served. As the day progresses and activity fills villages across the kingdom, the scale of Coosa's achievement becomes increasingly apparent. This was not a scattered collection of isolated settlements. It was a coordinated political realm connecting numerous communities across a substantial territory. Through agriculture, trade, ceremony, and diplomacy, Coosa emerged as one of the most influential powers in the southeastern woodlands. Long before European colonization reshaped North America, its leaders governed a sophisticated society whose legacy survives in archaeological sites, oral traditions, and historical records. Though largely forgotten by modern audiences, Coosa once stood among the great political powers of ancient America, a kingdom whose influence stretched across rivers, forests, and generations. As the afternoon sun shines across the villages and ceremonial centers of Coosa, another question emerges. How did a kingdom without stone castles, written constitutions, or permanent armies maintain authority over such a large territory? To answer this, we must look beyond modern assumptions about political power and enter a world where leadership depended upon relationships, diplomacy, ceremony, and consensus as much as force. The strength of Coosa did not come solely from military capability or economic resources. It came from its ability to unite diverse communities within a shared political framework. Understanding this achievement reveals much about the sophistication of indigenous governance in pre-Columbian North America. Imagine arriving at a major settlement within the Coosa realm. The community is alive with activity. Farmers return from fields. Artisans work near homes. Children play within open spaces. Visitors from neighboring settlements arrive carrying news and goods. At the center of the community stands a plaza bordered by important structures and ceremonial spaces. This is more than a physical location. It is the heart of political life. Here, leaders meet with visitors, oversee ceremonies, resolve disputes, and coordinate activities affecting multiple communities. Authority becomes visible through participation rather than isolation. Unlike monarchs ruling from distant palaces, Coosa's leaders remain deeply embedded within the social and ceremonial worlds of their people. Political organization in Coosa likely operated through a hierarchy of communities, linked by obligations and alliances. Smaller settlements maintained relationships with larger centers. Local leaders managed everyday affairs while recognizing broader regional authority. Such systems allowed coordination across substantial territories without requiring centralized bureaucracies. Relationships formed the foundation of governance. Kinship ties connected families and communities. Ceremonial obligations reinforced cooperation. Trade created mutual dependencies. Leaders succeeded when they maintained these networks effectively. Their power rested upon the ability to build consensus, distribute resources, and foster stability. Gift-giving played an important role within this political system. Valuable goods acquired through trade could be distributed to allies and supporters. Such exchanges strengthened relationships and demonstrated generosity, an important leadership quality in many indigenous societies. Authority was not merely claimed. It had to be continually reinforced through actions benefiting the community. Leaders who failed to maintain support risked losing influence. Political power, therefore, involved responsibility as much as privilege. The success of Coosa suggests that its leaders understood these dynamics well. Diplomacy occupied a central place in maintaining the kingdom. Neighboring societies possessed their own interests, leaders, and ambitions. Peaceful relationships required negotiation. Alliances helped ensure stability while facilitating trade and cooperation. Marriage connections between important families may have strengthened political ties. Ceremonial gatherings brought communities together, creating opportunities for communication and relationship building. Through diplomacy, Coosa extended influence without necessarily relying upon conquest. This approach allowed the kingdom to integrate diverse populations while preserving local identities. Warfare, however, remained a possibility within the broader political landscape. Competition over resources, territory, prestige, or alliances occasionally produced conflict. Leaders needed the ability to defend communities and respond to threats. Yet warfare alone could not sustain a kingdom. Long-term stability depended upon cooperation. The fact that Coosa maintained influence across a large region suggests that diplomacy often proved more important than military action. Successful leaders balanced strength with negotiation, ensuring that relationships remained productive rather than destructive. Ceremonial life reinforced political authority in powerful ways. Public rituals brought communities together and created shared experiences supporting collective identity. Leaders often played visible roles within these ceremonies, linking political authority to spiritual legitimacy. Participation in ritual demonstrated continuity with ancestral traditions and reinforced social order. Ceremonies also provided opportunities for communication. Important decisions, announcements, and alliances could be presented within contexts carrying cultural significance. Through ritual, politics became woven into broader understandings of community and responsibility. Messengers and travelers helped maintain connections between distant settlements. Information needed to move efficiently across the kingdom. News regarding harvests, ceremonies, alliances, and external developments traveled along established routes. Rivers served as major transportation corridors, while trails connected inland communities. Effective communication allowed leaders to coordinate activities across substantial distances. The existence of such networks demonstrates organizational sophistication often overlooked in discussions of pre-Columbian societies. Geography both supported and challenged Coosa's authority. Rivers facilitated travel and trade. Fertile valleys supported agriculture. Forests provided resources. Yet, distance created difficulties. Maintaining influence across large territories required constant effort. Leaders needed to nurture relationships, respond to local concerns, and adapt to changing circumstances. The kingdom's longevity suggests that these challenges were managed successfully for generations. Archaeological evidence continues revealing insights into this political world. Settlement patterns indicate relationships between major centers and smaller communities. Monumental construction projects demonstrate organizational capacity. Trade goods reveal extensive connections with other regions. Together, these discoveries paint a picture of a sophisticated political system capable of coordinating large populations without relying upon institutions familiar from European history. Coosa reminds us that complex governance can take many forms. One particularly fascinating aspect concerns the relationship between leadership and community welfare. Successful rulers depended upon the prosperity of the people they governed. Agricultural productivity, social harmony, and strong alliances benefited everyone. Leaders, therefore, had incentives to support conditions promoting stability and cooperation. Their legitimacy emerged partly from their ability to ensure collective well-being. This approach contrasts with stereotypes portraying ancient political authority as purely coercive. In Coosa, power appears to have been deeply relational. As evening approaches and shadows lengthen, across plazas and fields, people gather for conversations, meals, and ceremonies. Children listen to stories. Travelers share news from distant communities. Leaders meet with visitors to discuss matters affecting the kingdom. Life continues according to patterns established over generations. Yet beneath these ordinary activities lies a remarkable achievement. Coosa has succeeded in connecting numerous communities into a functioning political realm spanning large portions of the Southeast. Through diplomacy, ceremony, trade, and leadership, it has created stability within a complex and changing world. Long before European colonization, the Kingdom of Coosa demonstrated that North America possessed sophisticated systems of governance capable of managing extensive territories and large populations. Its story challenges simplistic understandings of the past and reveals a continent rich with political innovation, leadership, and statecraft centuries before European kingdoms established permanent footholds in the region. Chapter 1. Segment 2. The Calusa Kingdom, Lords of the Florida Coast. As the morning sun rises above the shallow waters of the Gulf Coast and golden light spreads across a maze of islands, estuaries, mangrove forests, and winding waterways, we arrive in one of the most unusual kingdoms in all of ancient North America. Unlike the great agricultural societies of the Mississippi Valley, unlike the farming chiefdoms of the Southeast, and unlike many of the communities we have explored so far, the Calusa built their power upon the sea. For centuries, long before European ships appeared on the horizon, the Calusa ruled vast portions of what is now southern Florida. Their influence extended across coastlines, islands, bays, and inland waterways. They controlled trade routes, commanded large populations, maintained a powerful ruling class, and governed a sophisticated political system that astonished the first Europeans who encountered it. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Calusa Kingdom was that it achieved all of this without relying heavily on agriculture. In a continent where farming often provided the foundation for political power, the Calusa followed a different path. They built one of North America's most powerful kingdoms through mastery of the coastal environment itself. Imagine standing on the shores of southwest Florida around the year 1400 CE. The landscape is unlike any other region in North America. Mangrove forests stretch across the horizon, shallow bays teem with fish, oyster beds, shellfish, sea turtles, and countless marine species provide abundant resources. Rivers flow slowly toward the sea. Hundreds of small islands dot the coastline. To an outsider unfamiliar with the region, navigation would be difficult and confusing. Yet to the Calusa, these waterways formed a vast network of highways connecting communities throughout their realm. Canoes glide across calm waters carrying fish, goods, messengers, and travelers. Villages rise above shell mounds constructed over generations. Everywhere there are signs of human activity shaped by intimate knowledge of the coastal world. The origins of Calusa power lay in this environmental mastery. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples had adapted to Florida's coastal ecosystems. Through careful observation and accumulated experience, they learned how to exploit marine resources with extraordinary efficiency. Fishing techniques became highly sophisticated. Massive wooden fish traps directed schools of fish into enclosed areas where they could be harvested. Canoes allowed movement across great distances. Seasonal knowledge helped communities anticipate changes in resource availability. Unlike agricultural societies dependent upon crops, the Calusa relied primarily upon the immense productivity of coastal waters. Fish, shellfish, marine mammals, and other aquatic resources provided reliable food supplies capable of supporting large populations. This abundance created opportunities for political complexity similar to those agriculture provided elsewhere. Over time, communities grew larger and more organized. Leadership structures emerged. Trade expanded. Ceremonial traditions developed. Eventually, the Calusa established a kingdom, dominating much of southern Florida. At the heart of this realm stood a ruling elite whose authority extended across numerous communities. Archaeological evidence suggests the existence of a highly stratified society with clear distinctions between leaders and ordinary people. Some European observers even described Calusa rulers in terms resembling kings. While such comparisons reflect European perspectives, they nonetheless indicate the remarkable scale of political organization. The capital, often associated with the site now known as Mount Key, occupied a strategic location within the estuarine environment. There, leaders coordinated political, economic, and ceremonial activities affecting large portions of the region. Mount Key itself stands as one of the most impressive engineering achievements in coastal North America. Constructed largely from accumulated shell deposits, the site rises above surrounding waters and provides evidence of centuries of occupation. Massive shell mounds, canals, and constructed features transformed the landscape. Building on this scale required extensive labor and organization. The very existence of such structures demonstrates the ability of Calusa leaders to mobilize resources and coordinate collective efforts. Unlike stone monuments elsewhere in the world, these constructions emerge from the materials most abundant in the local environment. Shell became architecture. The sea itself became the foundation of political power. Trade contributed significantly to the kingdom's influence. Coastal routes connected distant communities. Canoes traveled between islands and mainland settlements carrying valuable goods. Marine resources could be exchanged for materials originating farther inland. Exotic items moved through networks linking different regions of Florida and beyond. Trade strengthened alliances, facilitated communication, and enhanced the prestige of ruling elites. Leaders controlled access to important resources and routes, reinforcing their authority. The Calusa also developed diplomatic relationships with neighboring societies. Not every interaction involved conflict. Cooperation, negotiation, and exchange played essential roles in maintaining regional stability. Yet the kingdom's strength was not purely economic. Religious and ceremonial traditions reinforced political authority. European accounts describe rulers possessing sacred status and participating in rituals linking leadership with spiritual power. While many details remain uncertain, archaeological evidence suggests that ceremonial life occupied an important place within Calusa society. Public rituals, sacred spaces, and ancestral traditions likely helped legitimize authority, while strengthening community identity. Religion and governance worked together to support social order. Daily life within the kingdom reflected the unique environment. Fishing occupied a central role. Skilled fishers understood tides, seasonal migrations, and ecological patterns. Canoe construction represented an important craft. Communities built homes suited to coastal conditions. Families participated in activities supporting both local survival and broader political systems. Children learned environmental knowledge from elders. Travelers moved between settlements using waterways rather than roads. The rhythms of life followed the sea. Everything, from food production to transportation, depended upon intimate familiarity with coastal ecosystems. When Europeans eventually encountered the Calusa during the 16th century, they found a society unlike any they had previously seen in North America. Spanish explorers expected agricultural villages similar to those encountered elsewhere. Instead, they discovered a powerful maritime kingdom capable of resisting external influence. The Calusa demonstrated confidence rooted in centuries of political success. They controlled their territory effectively and understood the strategic advantages provided by the coastal environment. Their rulers negotiated with Europeans from positions of strength rather than weakness. As the day advances and sunlight reflects from countless waterways stretching across the kingdom, the uniqueness of the Calusa becomes increasingly clear. They achieved political complexity without relying heavily upon farming. They built monumental centers using shell rather than stone. They governed through mastery of rivers, bays, and coastal ecosystems. Long before European arrival, the Calusa kingdom stood among the most powerful societies in North America, a maritime realm whose influence extended across southern Florida and whose achievements continue challenging assumptions about how civilizations develop. Their story reminds us that there was no single path to complexity in ancient America. Different environments inspired different solutions, and the Calusa created one of the most remarkable of them all. As afternoon sunlight glitters across the waters surrounding the Calusa realm, we begin to understand that the true strength of this kingdom did not lie merely in its resources or geography. Many regions possess abundant natural wealth. What made the Calusa remarkable was their ability to transform environmental advantages into lasting political power. They built a kingdom capable of governing large populations, defending territory, maintaining trade networks, and preserving authority across generations. To appreciate this achievement, we must look more closely at how leadership functioned within the Calusa world and how rulers maintained control over one of the most strategically complex landscapes in North America. Imagine approaching the Calusa capital by canoe. The journey itself reveals the kingdom's strengths. Narrow waterways weave through mangrove forests, Hidden channels connect bays and estuaries. Islands appear and disappear along the horizon. For outsiders unfamiliar with the region, navigation presents constant challenges. Yet local guides move confidently through the landscape. Every channel, sandbar, and fishing ground is known. This knowledge provides power. Geography becomes an ally. The Calusa transformed environmental familiarity into political and military advantage, creating a realm difficult for rivals to challenge. At the center of this system stood rulers whose authority extended far beyond a single settlement. Historical accounts recorded by Spanish visitors describe leaders commanding respect from numerous communities. These rulers governed a hierarchical society in which political authority flowed through networks of obligation, tribute, and ceremonial responsibility. Communities under Calusa influence contributed resources, supporting elite leadership. In return, rulers coordinated defense, diplomacy, trade, and ceremonial activities. Such arrangements required careful management. Authority could not depend solely upon force. Leaders needed to maintain relationships, ensuring continued cooperation among diverse populations. Ceremonial life played an essential role in this process. Archaeological evidence and historical descriptions suggest that Calusa rulers possessed sacred dimensions of authority. Leadership was not merely political. It carried religious significance as well. Ceremonies reinforced social order while linking rulers to broader spiritual traditions. Public rituals created opportunities for communities to gather, celebrate shared identities, and witness the legitimacy of leadership. Through ceremony, political authority became embedded within cultural and spiritual life. This integration strengthened stability by connecting governance to deeply held beliefs. The capital itself functioned as both political and ceremonial center. Visitors arriving from distant communities encountered monumental shell constructions demonstrating the power of the ruling elite. Such architecture communicated messages without words. Massive mounds, carefully planned spaces, and elevated structures made authority visible. They reminded visitors that the kingdom possessed resources, organization, and continuity extending across generations. Monumental construction often serves similar functions worldwide. Whether built from stone, earth, or shell, large public works signal collective capacity and political strength. Defense represented another crucial responsibility of leadership. Southern Florida's waterways provided natural protection, but they also required constant vigilance. Rival groups existed beyond Calusa territory. Competition over resources and influence occasionally produced conflict. The kingdoms rulers organized responses to such challenges while maintaining internal stability. Historical accounts suggest that the Calusa were formidable opponents. Their knowledge of local geography allowed them to control movement through coastal regions effectively. Canoes could transport warriors rapidly. Familiarity with waterways created tactical advantages unavailable to outsiders. Military capability reinforced political authority, though diplomacy often remained equally important. Relations with neighboring societies reveal the sophistication of Calusa statecraft. Trade, marriage alliances, negotiations, and ceremonial exchanges all contributed to regional stability. Not every disagreement resulted in warfare. Skilled leaders understood the value of cooperation. Maintaining influence required balancing strength with diplomacy. Communities benefiting from peaceful exchange had incentives to preserve relationships. Through careful management, the Calusa expanded their influence while avoiding unnecessary conflict. One of the most fascinating aspects of Calusa leadership involves their interactions with Europeans. When Spanish expeditions arrived in Florida, they encountered a kingdom confident in its own power. Unlike some societies overwhelmed immediately by foreign arrivals, the Calusa initially approached Europeans from positions of relative strength. Their rulers negotiated, resisted, and adapted according to circumstances. Spanish observers often expressed frustration at their inability to dominate the region quickly. The Calusa understood their environment better than any outsider possibly could. They controlled access to resources and transportation routes. Their political structures remained intact. These advantages allowed them to respond strategically to new challenges. Yet the arrival of Europeans eventually introduced pressures unlike any previously encountered. Disease spread through populations lacking immunity to Old World pathogens. Demographic losses affected communities across the continent, including those within Florida. European colonization increased over time. Trade relationships changed. Military threats evolved. The political landscape became increasingly unstable. Even powerful kingdoms faced difficulties adapting to such unprecedented circumstances. The decline of Calusa power did not occur overnight. For generations, leaders attempted to navigate changing realities. Communities adapted in various ways. Some traditions persisted while others evolved. Yet the cumulative effects of disease, conflict, and colonial expansion gradually weakened the foundations supporting the kingdom. Despite these challenges, the legacy of Calusa leadership remains remarkable. They demonstrated that complex political systems could emerge within environments very different from those supporting agricultural civilizations elsewhere. Their kingdom challenges simplistic assumptions regarding the prerequisites for state formation. They prove that abundant marine resources, strategic geography, and effective leadership can support sophisticated societies. Archaeological research continues revealing new insights into this world. Excavations at Mount Key and other sites uncover evidence of construction, trade, daily life, and political organization. Every discovery strengthens appreciation for the scale of Calusa achievement. Far from being isolated coastal communities, they created one of the most influential kingdoms in pre-Columbian North America. As evening approaches and the waters of southern Florida reflect the colors of the setting sun, canoes return to settlements scattered across bays and estuaries. Fishers unload their catches. Families gather near homes. Leaders prepare for meetings and ceremonies. Life continues according to patterns established over centuries. Beneath these ordinary activities lies a remarkable political accomplishment. The Calusa transformed a challenging coastal environment into the foundation of a powerful kingdom. Through leadership, diplomacy, engineering, and environmental knowledge, they built a realm that commanded respect across southern Florida long before European colonization reshaped the continent. Their story stands as one of the most extraordinary examples of indigenous political achievement in ancient America, a reminder that some of North America's greatest kingdoms rose not beside vast agricultural fields, but from the waters of the sea itself. Chapter 1. Segment 3. The Powhatan Confederacy, Building a Regional Power. As the morning mist rises from the rivers of the Atlantic coast and sunlight filters through the forests of what is now eastern Virginia, we arrive in a world of villages, waterways, cultivated fields, and political alliances that stretched across an entire region. Long before English colonists established permanent settlements, and long before the name Jamestown entered the historical record, this landscape was already home to one of the most influential political powers in North America. Known today as the Powhatan Confederacy, it was a complex alliance of communities, united under a powerful leader whose influence extended across dozens of tribes and thousands of square miles. To European observers arriving in the early 17th century, the Confederacy appeared as a formidable regional force, yet its origins reached much deeper into the past, rooted in generations of diplomacy, leadership, agricultural success, and strategic planning. Like the Kingdom of Coosa and the Calusa realm, the Powhatan Confederacy demonstrates that North America before European colonization contained sophisticated political systems capable of, through the Chesapeake Bay region sometime around the year 1600. Rivers dominate the landscape. Broad waterways stretch inland, connecting communities separated by forests and marshes. Canoes move steadily across calm waters carrying fish, trade goods, travelers, and messages. Along riverbanks stand villages surrounded by agricultural fields where corn, beans, and squash flourish. Smoke rises from homes while children play near open gathering spaces. The region appears peaceful, yet beneath the rhythms of daily life lies a carefully organized political structure linking numerous communities together. At the center of this network stands a leader, known to history as Powhatan, though his personal name was Wahunsinkaw. Under his leadership, a collection of independent groups became part of a larger political alliance that would eventually encompass more than 30 communities. The rise of this confederacy was neither accidental nor inevitable. It resulted from deliberate efforts to build and maintain regional power. Wahunsinkaw inherited influence from earlier generations, but expanded it significantly through diplomacy, strategic alliances, and occasionally military action. Rather than ruling a centralized state in the modern sense, he governed through a network of relationships connecting numerous local leaders and communities. This system allowed considerable local autonomy while still recognizing broader regional authority. Such flexibility proved essential in a landscape where rivers, forests, and distances made direct control difficult. Political power within the Confederacy depended heavily upon kinship, obligation, and reciprocity. Communities joined the alliance for various reasons. Some sought protection. Others benefited from trade opportunities or political stability. Alliances strengthened access to resources and enhanced security in a world where neighboring groups sometimes competed for influence. Through a combination of persuasion, negotiation, and strategic leadership, Powhatan transformed a collection of communities into one of the most significant political entities on the Atlantic coast. Agriculture formed the foundation of this achievement. The fertile soils of the Chesapeake region supported productive farming. Fields produced substantial harvests of corn, beans, and squash, providing reliable food supplies, capable of supporting growing populations. Agricultural success allowed villages to expand and created surpluses supporting leaders, artisans, traders, and ceremonial activities. Like many societies we have explored, the Powhatan Confederacy depended ultimately upon the labor and knowledge of farmers. Every political achievement rested upon their ability to feed communities. Year after year, rivers played a role equally important. They functioned as highways connecting settlements throughout the region. Travel by canoe often proved more efficient than movement. Through dense forests, goods, information, and people moved along waterways with remarkable Frequency. Leaders could communicate across large distances. Trade networks linked. Communities. Ceremonial gatherings brought people together. The geography of the Chesapeake Bay helped facilitate political integration by providing natural transportation routes. Rather than separating communities, rivers connected them. Daily life within the Confederacy reflected both local traditions and broader regional identities. Families lived in villages consisting of homes arranged around communal spaces. Farming, fishing, hunting, and gathering occupied much of the population. Children learned practical skills and cultural knowledge from parents and elders. Ceremonies reinforced social bonds. Trade connected communities to neighboring regions. Most people experienced the Confederacy not as an abstract political institution, but as a network of relationships influencing everyday life. Authority remained visible through leaders, gatherings, obligations, and shared traditions. European accounts provide valuable, though imperfect, insights into this world. When English colonists arrived in the early 17th century, they encountered a confederacy already well established. Observers noted the authority exercised by Powhatan and recognized the scale of his influence. Yet these accounts must be interpreted carefully. English writers often viewed indigenous societies through European assumptions regarding kingship and governance. While such descriptions sometimes capture important realities, they can also obscure the unique characteristics of indigenous political systems. The Powhatan Confederacy was not simply a European-style kingdom transplanted into North America. It was a distinct form of governance shaped by local traditions, environmental conditions, and cultural values. Religion and politics were closely connected within this system. Leaders derived authority not only from practical leadership, but also from participation in ceremonial life. Rituals reinforced social order and strengthened community identity. Public gatherings provided opportunities to communicate decisions, resolve disputes, and celebrate shared traditions. Through ceremony, political authority became linked to broader understandings of responsibility and community well-being. One of the Confederacy's greatest strengths lay in its adaptability. The alliance incorporated diverse communities while allowing local variation. This flexibility helped maintain stability across a large territory. Leaders could respond to changing circumstances without requiring rigid uniformity. Such adaptability would prove important as new challenges emerged during the period of European contact. As the day advances and activity continues throughout villages, connected by rivers and alliances, the scale of the Powhatan achievement becomes increasingly clear. Here was a political power capable of coordinating dozens of communities across a substantial region. Through agriculture, diplomacy, trade, ceremony, and leadership, the Confederacy created stability and influence extending far beyond individual settlements. Long before permanent English colonization transformed the Atlantic coast, the Powhatan Confederacy stood as one of the most powerful political entities in eastern North America. Its leaders governed not through castles or written laws, but through relationships, obligations, and shared identities, carefully maintained across generations. Their success reminds us that sophisticated political organization existed throughout the continent long before Europeans arrived. As afternoon sunlight reflects from the rivers and estuaries of the Chesapeake Bay, we turn our attention from the rise of the Powhatan Confederacy to the methods through which it maintained authority across such a large and diverse region. Building a political alliance is one challenge. Sustaining it across generations is another entirely. The true achievement of Powhatan leadership lay not simply in bringing communities together, but in creating systems capable of preserving stability, managing relationships, and responding to external pressures. To understand how this worked, imagine yourself arriving as a visitor at one of the Confederacy's major settlements. Canoes line the shoreline. Farmers return from nearby fields. Traders unpack goods acquired through regional exchange networks. Messengers arrive carrying news from distant communities. The village serves as both a local home and a node within a much larger political system. Every interaction reflects connections extending beyond the settlement itself. The Confederacy functioned through relationships. Local leaders retained authority within their own communities, while recognizing the broader influence of Powhatan and the central leadership. This arrangement allowed flexibility, rather than attempting direct control over every aspect of local life. The Confederacy relied upon cooperation and mutual obligation. Communities contributed resources, participated in alliances, and supported collective goals. In return, they gained access to protection, trade opportunities, and political stability. Such systems required constant maintenance. Leaders needed to cultivate trust, resolve disputes, and ensure that benefits remained visible. Authority was not automatic. It depended upon successful relationship building. Tribute played an important role within this framework. Certain communities provided food, goods, or other resources to central leadership. European observers sometimes interpreted these exchanges as taxes similar to those found in European kingdoms. The reality was likely more complex. Tribute often functioned within broader systems of reciprocity. Resources collected by leaders could be redistributed during ceremonies, used to support visitors, or deployed during times of need. Generosity enhanced prestige. Leaders strengthened authority by demonstrating their ability to provide for communities and maintain social harmony. Political power, therefore, involved both receiving and giving. Trade further reinforced the Confederacy's cohesion. Rivers connected communities throughout the Chesapeake region, allowing goods to move efficiently. Agricultural products, fish, tools, decorative items, and other resources circulated through exchange networks. Trade created interdependence. Communities benefited from participation in larger systems linking different regions and ecological zones. Leaders who facilitated exchange gained influence because they helped ensure prosperity. Economic relationships and political relationships became closely intertwined. Diplomacy occupied a central place in Powhatan governance. Neighboring societies possessed their own interests and ambitions. Maintaining peace often required negotiation. Marriage alliances linked important families. Ceremonial gatherings provided opportunities to strengthen relationships. Messengers carried information between communities. Through diplomacy, leaders reduced conflict while expanding influence. The success of the Confederacy demonstrates that political authority often rested upon persuasion and cooperation rather than coercion alone. Warfare remained a possibility, but diplomacy offered more sustainable solutions. European arrival introduced new complexities into this carefully balanced system. When English colonists established Jamestown in 1607, they entered a region already shaped by Powhatan political authority. The newcomers did not arrive in an empty wilderness. They encountered a sophisticated alliance governing much of the surrounding territory. Initial interactions involved diplomacy, trade, and cautious observation. Both sides attempted to understand one another while pursuing their own interests. Powhatan leaders recognized opportunities as well as risks. the arrival of foreigners possessing unfamiliar technologies and goods required careful management. Early relations alternated between cooperation and tension. At times, trade benefited both sides. Colonists depended heavily upon indigenous food supplies during difficult periods. Powhatan leaders evaluated how the newcomers might fit within existing political frameworks. Yet misunderstandings proved common. English colonists often failed to appreciate the complexity of indigenous governance. Assumptions regarding land ownership, authority, and political relationships differed significantly between the two societies. What one side viewed as diplomacy, the other might interpret differently. These cultural misunderstandings contributed to growing tensions over time. Despite such challenges, Powhatan leadership demonstrated remarkable adaptability. The Confederacy had been built through negotiation, alliance building, and strategic thinking. Those same skills were applied to interactions with Europeans. Leaders adjusted policies according to changing circumstances. Cooperation occurred when beneficial. Resistance emerged when necessary. The political flexibility that had helped create the Confederacy also shaped its response to new realities. Religion and ceremony continued reinforcing authority throughout this period. Public rituals brought communities together and reminded participants of shared identities. Leaders occupied important roles within ceremonial life, linking governance to cultural and spiritual traditions. Such practices strengthened continuity during times of uncertainty. As external pressures increased, maintaining social cohesion became increasingly important. Ceremonies helped preserve connections between communities and generations. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts together reveal the sophistication of this political system. Settlement patterns demonstrate regional integration. Trade goods indicate extensive networks of exchange. Written observations describe leadership structures recognized even by foreign visitors. Although no indigenous written records survive from this period, the available evidence paints a clear picture. The Powhatan Confederacy was one of the most successful political alliances in eastern North America. It governed substantial populations, managed complex relationships, and maintained influence across a large territory. Yet, like many indigenous powers, it eventually faced challenges. Unlike any encountered previously, European expansion, disease, population changes, and ongoing conflict gradually altered the balance of power. The Confederacy adapted repeatedly, but the cumulative pressures proved immense. Understanding this later history, however, should not obscure the achievements that came before. For generations, Powhatan leaders successfully governed one of the most influential political entities on the Atlantic coast. As evening approaches, and shadows lengthen across the rivers connecting communities throughout the Chesapeake region, daily life continues much as it has for centuries. Families gather for meals. Traders prepare for future journeys. Leaders meet with visitors and allies. Children listen to stories passed down through generations. Beneath these ordinary activities lies an extraordinary political accomplishment. The Powhatan Confederacy transformed a collection of communities into a regional power capable of shaping the history of Eastern North America. Through diplomacy, trade, ceremony, and leadership, it demonstrated that sophisticated governance flourished throughout the continent long before European colonization. Its story remains one of the clearest examples of indigenous political innovation, reminding us that America's forgotten kingdoms were not merely local societies, but influential powers whose legacies continue to echo across the landscape today. Chapter 2. Segment 1. The Natchez Chiefdom, Sacred Leadership and Social Order. As dawn breaks across the lower Mississippi Valley and a blanket of mist rises from the rivers, forests, and fertile floodplains of what is now Mississippi and Louisiana, we arrive in the homeland of one of the most fascinating and distinctive societies in all of ancient North America. Long before modern borders divided the landscape, before European settlements expanded across the region, and before many indigenous traditions were disrupted by disease and colonization, the Natchez people governed a powerful chiefdom unlike any other. Their society was organized around sacred leadership, elaborate ceremonies, monumental architecture, and a social order that astonished the Europeans who later encountered it. While kingdoms such as Coosa, the Calusa realm, and the Powhatan Confederacy exercised power through alliances, diplomacy, and regional influence, the Natchez developed a political system in which authority was inseparable from spirituality. To understand the Natchez is to enter a world where rulers were not simply political leaders, but living symbols of cosmic order, where sacred fires burned continuously, and where the organization of society reflected beliefs about the relationship between humanity, the natural world, and the heavens above. Imagine standing on a high earthen mound overlooking a Natchez settlement sometime around the year 1500. Below you, homes surround open plazas where daily life unfolds. Farmers work nearby fields filled with corn, beans, squash, and other crops. Traders arrive carrying goods from neighboring regions. Children move between households while elders gather beneath shaded structures discussing community matters. At first glance, the settlement may resemble other Mississippian communities spread throughout the Southeast. Yet at its center stands something remarkable, a sacred mound supporting the residence of the ruler and important ceremonial buildings. This elevated position is not accidental. It reflects a worldview in which leadership occupies a special place between the earthly and spiritual realms. The ruler, known in later historical records as the Great Sun, possessed authority rooted not merely in politics, but in sacred tradition. The origins of Natchez society extend deep into the Mississippian world that had flourished across much of the Southeast for centuries. Large agricultural populations, monumental earthworks, regional trade networks, and ceremonial centers formed the foundation from which many powerful chiefdoms emerged. Yet the Natchez preserved aspects of Mississippian culture long after other major centers had declined. By the time Europeans documented their society, the Natchez maintained traditions that may have reflected earlier patterns of governance dating back generations. This continuity makes them particularly valuable for understanding how sacred leadership functioned within ancient North American political systems. Agriculture provided the economic foundation supporting Natchez society. The fertile soils of the Mississippi Valley produced abundant harvests capable of sustaining substantial populations. Cornfields stretched across the landscape, carefully cultivated by farming families whose labor supported the entire community. Reliable food supplies allowed the development of specialized roles. Religious leaders, artisans, traders, and political authorities could devote significant attention to responsibilities extending beyond food production. Like many complex societies, the Natchez depended upon agricultural success. Yet what distinguished them was the way they connected economic productivity to sacred authority. The Great Sun occupied the highest position within Natchez society. According to historical accounts recorded by French observers, the Great Sun was regarded as a sacred figure whose authority extended over political, religious, and ceremonial life. While European descriptions must always be interpreted cautiously, archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests that Natchez leadership genuinely possessed strong spiritual dimensions. The ruler was not viewed merely as an administrator or military leader. Instead, the position carried profound symbolic significance. The well-being of the community was closely linked to the legitimacy and ritual responsibilities of the ruling elite. Sacred fires burning continuously within ceremonial spaces symbolized this connection between leadership and cosmic order. Monumental architecture reinforced these ideas. Earthen mounds dominated important settlements, elevating sacred structures above surrounding areas. Constructing these mounds required immense labor coordinated across generations. Thousands of baskets of earth were carried and arranged to create platforms supporting temples, elite residences, and ceremonial buildings. These constructions transformed the landscape into a visible expression of social and spiritual hierarchy. Standing atop a mound, one could literally look down upon the community, reinforcing the symbolic distinction between sacred authority and ordinary life. Yet these structures were not simply displays of power. They served as focal points for ceremonies bringing communities together and reaffirming shared beliefs. Religion permeated daily existence. Ceremonies marked seasonal transitions, agricultural cycles, and important social events. Public rituals reinforced social cohesion while connecting individuals to larger cosmological frameworks. The sacred fire held particular significance. Maintained continuously within ceremonial precincts, it represented continuity, stability, and the enduring relationship between the people and the spiritual forces guiding the world. Ritual specialists ensured that these traditions remained intact. Through ceremony, the Natchez linked political authority, religious belief, and communal identity into a unified system. Social organization reflected this worldview. Historical accounts describe a structured society divided into social classes associated with sacred leadership. While the exact nature of these divisions remains a subject of scholarly discussion, it is clear that social hierarchy played an important role within Natchez culture. Status influenced responsibilities, marriage patterns, and access to certain roles. Yet hierarchy alone does not explain the system. The distinctions carried symbolic meaning connected to broader understandings of cosmic order and social harmony. Leadership was not simply inherited privilege. It involved obligations, ceremonial duties, and responsibilities toward the community. Trade connected the Natchez to neighboring societies throughout the southeast. Goods moved along river routes linking communities across large distances. Marine shells, stone materials, copper objects, and other valuable resources circulated through exchange networks. Participation in trade enhanced prestige and facilitated diplomatic relationships. The Natchez were not isolated. They existed within a broader world of alliances, rivalries, and interactions extending across the Mississippi Valley and beyond. Their sacred leadership system operated within this regional. Centuries later often expressed fascination with Natchez society because it appeared both familiar and unfamiliar. They recognized rulers, social hierarchy, and ceremonial authority. Yet the integration of spirituality and governance differed from European expectations. Observers described elaborate rituals, sacred fires, and reverence shown toward the great sun. While their interpretations were shaped by outsider perspectives, they nonetheless captured something Important, the Natchez had developed one of the most distinctive political and religious systems in North America. As the morning sun rises higher above the mounds and plazas of a Natchez settlement, illuminating sacred spaces where leaders prepare for ceremonies and farmers begin work in nearby fields, the sophistication of this world becomes clear. Here, political authority was inseparable from spiritual meaning. Leadership reflected cosmic order. Architecture embodied sacred principles. Daily life unfolded within a framework connecting individuals to community, ancestry, and the forces believed to govern the universe. Long before European colonization transformed the Mississippi Valley, the Natchez Chiefdom stood as a remarkable example of sacred kingship in ancient America, a society where power, belief, and identity were woven together into a single enduring tradition. As the day advances and activity fills the plazas, fields, and ceremonial spaces of the Natchez world, we begin to see that sacred authority alone could not sustain a society. Beliefs may legitimize leadership, but communities also require systems capable of organizing daily life, maintaining stability, resolving disputes, and preserving continuity across generations. The true strength of the Natchez chiefdom lay in its ability to combine spiritual meaning with practical governance. Sacred leadership provided legitimacy, while social organization ensured that communities functioned effectively. Together, these elements created a society that endured for centuries and remained one of the most distinctive political systems encountered by Europeans in North America. Imagine standing within the central plaza of a Natchez settlement during an important ceremonial gathering. Families arrive from surrounding areas. Traders display goods acquired through regional exchange networks. Elders share stories preserving community history. Religious leaders prepare ritual activities. The great sun and members of the ruling elite occupy prominent positions within the proceedings. At first glance, the event appears religious in nature, yet it also serves political, social, and economic functions. Announcements may be made, alliances reinforced, disputes addressed, collective identities renewed. This blending of sacred and practical responsibilities characterized Natchez governance. Leadership did not operate separately from community life. It was embedded within the rhythms of everyday existence. The great sun represented the highest level of authority, but governance depended upon broader networks of leaders and institutions. Local communities required coordination. Agricultural production needed organization. Ceremonies demanded planning. Trade relationships had to be maintained. Information needed to circulate. Such responsibilities could not be handled by a single individual alone. Historical accounts suggest the existence of additional leadership roles, supporting the broader political structure. Family relationships, kinship networks, and inherited positions help distribute authority throughout society. Governance therefore operated at multiple levels, combining centralized sacred leadership with local participation. Agriculture remained central to this system. Successful harvests ensured food security and supported population growth. Leaders had strong incentives to promote stability because agricultural productivity benefited the entire community. Ceremonies often coincided with planting and harvest seasons, reinforcing connections between spiritual traditions and practical necessities. Through ritual, the community acknowledged dependence upon environmental cycles while reaffirming social responsibilities. Farming was not merely economic activity. It formed part of a broader worldview linking human effort to cosmic order. Social hierarchy influenced daily interactions in ways both visible and subtle. Certain individuals possessed greater prestige due to family background, ceremonial responsibilities, or political roles. Yet status also carried obligations. Members of the elite participated in rituals, hosted gatherings, managed relationships, and represented community interests. Leadership involved service as well as privilege. Maintaining legitimacy required visible contributions to collective well-being. The sacred status of rulers increased expectations regarding their conduct and responsibilities. Authority had to be demonstrated continuously through actions benefiting the community. Public ceremonies provided opportunities to reinforce these expectations. Monumental architecture played a crucial role in shaping social experience. Mounds, plazas, and ceremonial structures organized movement through space and communicated symbolic messages. Large gatherings occurring within these environments reminded participants of shared identities and collective traditions. Architecture made social order visible. Elevated structures signaled sacred authority. Open plazas encouraged communal participation. The built environment itself helped sustain political stability by reinforcing cultural values. Every ceremony conducted within these spaces strengthened the relationship between physical landscapes and social organization. Trade contributed to prosperity, while expanding political influence. The Natchez occupied a strategic position within the lower Mississippi Valley, connecting them to broader networks extending across the southeast. Goods arriving from distant regions enhanced prestige and facilitated diplomacy. Leaders could distribute valuable items during ceremonies, strengthening alliances and rewarding cooperation. Exchange therefore served social and political purposes alongside economic ones. Participation in regional trade networks also exposed the Natchez to new ideas and opportunities, integrating them into wider patterns of interaction. Diplomacy required careful attention. Neighboring societies possessed their own leaders, interests, and traditions. Maintaining peaceful relationships often involved negotiation, gift exchange, and ceremonial interaction. Conflict remained possible, but diplomacy generally offered more sustainable solutions. Skilled leaders balanced local priorities with regional realities. Through diplomacy, the Natchez preserved autonomy while participating in broader political landscapes. One of the most striking aspects of Natchez society involves its commitment to continuity. Sacred fires burned continuously, ceremonies repeated, patterns established by ancestors. Leadership positions followed inherited traditions. Architecture preserved symbolic meanings across generations. Such continuity created stability within a changing world. People understood themselves as participants in long historical narratives, extending beyond individual lifetimes. Ancestors remained important sources of identity and legitimacy. Through ritual and memory, the past remained present within community life. European arrival introduced challenges unlike any previously encountered. French explorers and settlers entering the Mississippi Valley during the 17th and 18th centuries observed Natchez society while simultaneously becoming participants in regional politics. Initial interactions included trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Yet these relationships grew increasingly complex over time. Competition over resources, misunderstandings regarding authority, and broader colonial ambitions created tensions. Disease further disrupted indigenous communities throughout the region. Population losses affected social structures and reduced the resilience of traditional systems. Despite these pressures, the Natchez demonstrated remarkable determination in preserving their traditions. Leaders continued performing ceremonies. Communities maintained sacred fires and ritual practices. Cultural continuity remained a priority, even as circumstances changed. This resilience highlights the strength of the social and spiritual foundations supporting Natchez society. Their identity did not depend solely upon political power. It rested upon shared beliefs, relationships, and historical memory. Archaeological discoveries continue revealing insights into this remarkable world. Excavations uncover mound complexes, ceremonial spaces, residential areas, and artifacts reflecting daily life. Historical accounts provide additional perspectives, though always filtered through outsider interpretations. Together, these sources reveal a society balancing sacred authority with practical governance in sophisticated ways. The Natchez were neither simple villagers nor absolute monarchs in the European sense. They created a distinctive political tradition rooted in indigenous understandings of leadership, spirituality, and community. As evening approaches and the sacred fire continues burning atop the mound while families gather throughout the settlement below, the enduring significance of Natchez society becomes apparent. Here was a chiefdom where leadership carried cosmic meaning, where social order reflected spiritual beliefs, and where governance sought harmony between community needs and sacred responsibilities. Long before modern states emerged in North America, the Natchez developed one of the continent's most unique systems of sacred authority. Their story reminds us that America's forgotten kingdoms were not merely political entities. They were living worlds of belief, tradition, and social organization whose complexity rivals that of many better-known civilizations throughout history. Chapter 2. Segment 2. Mississippian Rulers. Cahokia's Leadership and Government. As the morning sun rises over the broad floodplains of the Mississippi River and lights slowly spreads across one of the greatest cities ever built in pre-Columbian North America, we arrive at a place that would have seemed extraordinary to anyone witnessing it at its height. Long before European cities appeared on the continent, before colonial capitals, state governments, or modern nations existed, a remarkable urban center flourished near the confluence of major river systems. In what is now Illinois, today we know it as Cahokia. At its peak, sometime between the 11th and 13th centuries, Cahokia was the largest city north of Mexico, home to tens of thousands of people living within a landscape transformed by human ambition, organization, and vision. Massive earthen mounds dominated the horizon. Plazas stretched across carefully planned districts. Roads connected neighborhoods. Markets buzzed with activity. Ceremonies gathered enormous crowds. Yet behind all of this stood a question that continues to fascinate archaeologists and historians today. Who governed Cahokia, and how did they manage a city of such unprecedented scale? To understand the rulers of Cahokia is to explore one of the most sophisticated political systems ever developed in ancient North America. Imagine approaching the city around the year 1100 CE. From a distance, the first thing visible is not a wall or fortress, but the immense silhouette of Monk's Mound, the largest earthen structure in North America. Rising more than 100 feet above the surrounding plain, it dominates the landscape. Workers, traders, travelers, farmers, and visitors move along pathways leading toward the city. Smoke rises from thousands of homes scattered across the region. The sheer scale of activity suggests an extraordinary degree of organization. Cities do not emerge accidentally. They require leadership capable of coordinating labor, managing resources, resolving disputes, organizing ceremonies, and maintaining social cohesion among large populations. Cahokia's rulers accomplished all of these tasks without written bureaucracies, standing armies, or many of the institutions associated with later states. Their success demonstrates the sophistication of Mississippian governance. The rise of Cahokia was closely connected to agricultural productivity. The fertile soils of the American Bottom region provided ideal conditions for farming corn. Agriculture supported growing populations and generated food surpluses capable of sustaining specialists whose responsibilities extended beyond food production. Artisans crafted tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects. Religious leaders organized rituals. Traders connected the city to distant regions. Political authorities coordinated activities affecting thousands of people. Agriculture created the economic foundation upon which urban life could flourish. Yet abundant food alone cannot explain Cahokia's emergence. Leadership transformed opportunity into reality. At some point, influential individuals or groups successfully persuaded large numbers of people to participate in ambitious construction projects reshaping the landscape. The building of monks' mound alone required the movement of millions of cubic feet of earth. Thousands of workers carried soil in baskets, gradually creating a structure larger than many famous monuments. Elsewhere in the world, similar efforts produced dozens of additional mounds throughout the city. Such projects demanded planning, coordination, and authority. Leaders had to organize labor while maintaining community support. The existence of these monuments reveals the presence of political systems capable of mobilizing resources on a remarkable scale. Yet Cahokia's rulers were more than construction managers. They occupied positions combining political, ceremonial, and symbolic authority. Archaeological evidence suggests that leadership was closely tied to religion and cosmology. The placement of mounds, orientation of structures, and organization of public spaces often reflected sacred principles. Leaders likely presented themselves as mediators between human communities and spiritual forces. Public ceremonies reinforced these connections, while legitimizing authority. In many ancient societies, political power depended not merely upon coercion, but upon the ability to persuade people that leadership served a larger cosmic purpose. Cahokia appears to have followed a similar pattern. Monumental architecture communicated authority visually. Standing atop Monk's Mound, leaders could overlook much of the city. Ceremonial buildings occupied elevated positions visible from great distances. Such arrangements were not accidental. Architecture reinforced social hierarchy and reminded residents of the importance of central authority. Public spaces further strengthened these messages. Large plazas provided locations for gatherings involving thousands of participants. Ceremonies, festivals, markets, and political events all occurred within environments carefully designed to emphasize collective identity and leadership legitimacy. Trade played an equally important role in sustaining Cahokia's influence. Goods arrived from across vast portions of North America. Marine shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, stone materials from distant regions, and numerous other resources circulated through networks connecting the city to faraway communities. Participation in these exchanges enhanced prestige and strengthened political relationships. Leaders controlled access to valuable goods and used them to reinforce alliances, reward supporters, and demonstrate power. Trade transformed Cahokia from a regional center into a hub linking diverse societies across the continent. Daily governance involved countless responsibilities. Large populations require systems for managing disputes, coordinating construction, organizing food distribution, and maintaining public order. Although no written, high degree of organization, neighborhoods appear carefully arranged. Construction projects followed coherent plans. Ceremonial calendars likely coordinated community activities. Such patterns indicate leadership capable of guiding complex urban systems. Yet governance probably relied heavily upon cooperation and shared cultural values rather than centralized bureaucracy. Alone, Mississippian political traditions emphasized relationships, obligations, and ceremonial legitimacy. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cahokia concerns the balance between local and regional authority. The city influenced surrounding communities extending across a broad territory. Smaller settlements participated in networks centered upon Cahokia. Some may have recognized its leaders as possessing special status. Others maintained alliances based upon trade, religion, or kinship. Influence could take many forms. Political power was not necessarily exercised through direct control. Instead, authority often flowed through relationships connecting communities within broader systems. This flexibility helped extend Cahokia's reach while accommodating regional diversity. As the morning progresses and activity fills plazas, workshops, fields, and ceremonial spaces throughout the city, the scale of Cahokia's achievement becomes increasingly apparent. Here was an urban center rivaling many contemporary cities elsewhere in the world. Its rulers coordinated monumental construction, managed extensive trade networks, organized ceremonies, and governed large populations without the institutions commonly associated with later states. Long before European arrival, Cahokia demonstrated that North America was capable of producing sophisticated political systems and powerful leaders whose influence extended across vast regions. Their story challenges outdated assumptions about the continent's past and reveals a world of complexity, ambition, and innovation hidden beneath the grass-covered mounds that remain today. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows across Cahokia's plazas and earthen monuments, we move beyond the city's impressive physical achievements and consider a deeper question. How did Cahokia's leaders maintain authority over such a large and diverse population for generations? Building a city is an extraordinary accomplishment, but sustaining it requires more than engineering skill. It demands social cohesion, political legitimacy, cultural identity, and systems capable of managing change. The rulers of Cahokia operated within a world where leadership depended not only upon power but also upon persuasion, ceremony, and the ability to create shared purpose among thousands of people. Understanding how they accomplished this provides one of the most fascinating insights into ancient governance in North America. Imagine standing within the Grand Plaza during a major public gathering. Thousands of people have assembled from neighborhoods throughout the city and from surrounding communities beyond its boundaries. Traders display goods acquired through distant exchange networks. Religious leaders prepare ceremonies. Families gather to witness events carrying both spiritual and political significance. Above the crowd, atop Monk's Mound, important figures oversee the proceedings. The scene illustrates a key feature of Cahokian leadership. Authority was public. Leaders did not govern from hidden chambers isolated from society. Instead, ceremonies and communal gatherings made power visible while reinforcing collective identity. Participation helped people understand their place within a larger social order. Religion played a central role in this process. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cahokia's leaders linked political authority to cosmological beliefs. The city itself appears carefully designed according to symbolic principles. Certain structures align with celestial events. Public spaces reflect ordered relationships between different parts of the community. Such patterns imply that governance was intertwined with sacred understandings of the universe. Leaders likely presented themselves as guardians of balance between human society and cosmic forces. Ceremonies reaffirmed these connections, strengthening legitimacy through shared belief. This relationship between politics and spirituality was not unique to Cahokia, but the scale at which it operated there was remarkable. Public rituals served multiple functions simultaneously. They honored spiritual traditions, reinforced social hierarchies, celebrated community achievements, and created opportunities for communication. Leaders could announce decisions, distribute resources, and strengthen alliances within ceremonial contexts carrying deep cultural significance. Participation fostered unity among diverse populations. In a city containing thousands of residents from different backgrounds, shared ceremonies helped create common identities. They reminded individuals that they belonged to something larger than their immediate families or neighborhoods. Gift distribution likely formed another important aspect of governance. Trade networks brought valuable goods into Cahokia from across North America. Marine shells, copper objects, finely crafted ornaments, and exotic materials carried prestige. Leaders who controlled access to such items could reward loyalty, strengthen alliances, and enhance their own status. Yet this was not simply a matter of wealth accumulation. In many indigenous societies, generosity increased prestige. Effective leaders demonstrated their value by redistributing resources and supporting community well-being. Political authority, therefore, depended partly upon the ability to share rather than merely possess. Labor organization reveals additional insights into Cahokia's leadership. Monumental construction projects required cooperation on a massive scale. Thousands of workers participated in building mounds, plazas, roads, and other public works. Such efforts could not be sustained through coercion alone. Leaders needed to motivate participation by connecting construction to shared values and collective goals. Public projects likely reinforced community identity while demonstrating the benefits of coordinated action. Every basket of earth carried to a mound represented not only labor but also participation in a broader vision of society. Trade networks further expanded Cahokia's influence. Communities throughout the Mississippi Valley and beyond maintained relationships with the city. Some sought access to prestigious goods. Others participated in shared ceremonial traditions. Still others benefited from economic opportunities created by exchange. These connections extended Cahokia's reach far beyond its immediate surroundings. Influence flowed along rivers, trails, and social networks linking distant regions. Leaders managed these relationships carefully, balancing local needs with broader ambitions. Yet, no political system remained static forever. Even during its height, Cahokia faced challenges. Population growth created pressures on resources and infrastructure. Environmental changes may have affected agriculture. Social tensions likely emerged within a city of such size and diversity. Leaders needed to adapt continuously to changing circumstances. Their success over generations suggests considerable flexibility and resilience. Governance involved problem-solving as much as tradition. One of the most intriguing mysteries concerns how decisions were actually made. Without written records, archaeologists must rely upon material evidence and comparisons with other indigenous societies. Leadership may have involved councils, influential families, religious authorities, and community participation alongside prominent rulers. Authority could have been distributed across multiple institutions rather than concentrated entirely in a single individual. Such arrangements would have provided stability by balancing different interests and perspectives. Whatever the exact structure, the results speak for themselves. Cahokia functioned as a major urban center for centuries. The city's eventual decline remains one of North America's great historical mysteries. By the 14th century, population levels decreased, and many monumental spaces were no longer maintained as before. Scholars continue debating the causes. Environmental pressures, political changes, economic shifts, social tensions, and other factors may all have contributed. It is likely that no single explanation fully accounts for the transformation. Complex societies rarely disappear because of one event alone. Instead, multiple challenges accumulate over time. Yet decline should not overshadow achievement. For centuries, Cahokia represented one of the most successful experiments in large-scale urban governance ever undertaken north of Mexico. Its leaders coordinated construction projects rivaling famous monuments elsewhere in the world. They managed extensive trade networks connecting vast regions. They created ceremonies and institutions capable of uniting thousands of people within a shared cultural framework. They governed through combinations of sacred authority, public participation, diplomacy, and social organization. As evening approaches and the shadows of Cahokia's great mounds stretch across the landscape, one can imagine the city at its height. Smoke rises from thousands of homes. Traders prepare for journeys. Families gather in plazas. Ceremonies continue beneath the fading light. Leaders meet to discuss matters affecting the community. The city hums with life, confidence, and purpose. Long before European arrival, Cahokia stood as proof that ancient America contained sophisticated governments, powerful rulers, and complex political traditions capable of shaping entire regions. Its story remains one of the greatest chapters in the history of North America, a reminder that beneath the modern landscape lie the traces of forgotten leaders who once guided one of the continent's most extraordinary civilizations. Chapter 2. Segment 3. Royal Traditions, Ceremonies, Symbols, and the Meaning of Power. As the sun begins its slow descent across the landscapes of ancient North America, casting warm light over earthen mounds, coastal capitals, forest villages, and riverine cities, we arrive at a subject that united many of the kingdoms and chiefdoms we have explored so far. Although the rulers of Coosa governed fertile valleys, the Calusa commanded coastal waterways, the Powhatan Confederacy managed regional alliances, the Natchez maintained sacred leadership, and Cahokia oversaw one of the continent's greatest cities. They all shared something deeper than political authority alone. Each society developed traditions that transformed leadership into something meaningful, visible, and enduring. Across North America, rulers did not simply govern. They participated in ceremonies, displayed sacred symbols, inherited responsibilities from ancestors, and embodied ideals that connected communities to larger understandings of order, identity, and the cosmos. To modern observers, royal traditions may bring to mind crowns, thrones, palaces, and written laws. Yet the royal traditions of ancient America followed different paths. There, power emerged from ritual, symbolism, memory, and relationships rather than from stone castles. or written constitutions. To understand these traditions is to understand how leadership became more than administration. It became a sacred performance linking the past, present, and future. Imagine arriving at a major ceremonial gathering somewhere in the southeast around the year 1400. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people have traveled from surrounding communities. Canoes line riverbanks. Traders display valuable goods acquired through extensive exchange networks. Families gather within large plazas while musicians prepare instruments and ceremonial leaders organize rituals. At the center of attention stands a ruler or chief whose presence carries significance beyond personal identity. The individual represents continuity. Ancestors are remembered through them. Community traditions are reaffirmed through them. Political authority becomes visible through carefully structured ceremonies designed to communicate meaning. Every gesture, object, and action contributes to a larger story regarding leadership and legitimacy. One of the most important elements of royal tradition involved ancestry. Throughout many indigenous societies, leaders derived authority not simply from personal achievements, but from relationships connecting them to earlier generations. Genealogy mattered because it established continuity. Communities wanted assurance that leadership reflected established traditions rather than temporary ambition. By tracing connections to respected ancestors, rulers reinforced legitimacy while reminding people that authority existed. Within larger historical frameworks, the past remained present through these relationships. Ancestors were not distant figures remembered occasionally. They formed active components of political and spiritual identity. Ceremonies often emphasized these connections, linking current leaders to generations who had governed before them. Symbols played equally important roles. Leadership needed to be recognizable. Certain objects, clothing, ornaments, and ceremonial items communicated authority immediately. Shell gorgets, copper ornaments, feathered regalia, carved staffs, and other prestigious items often carried meanings extending far beyond decoration. They represented status, responsibility, spiritual relationships, and community recognition. Valuable materials acquired through trade enhanced their significance. Copper from distant regions, marine shells transported inland, and carefully crafted ceremonial objects became visible expressions of influence. When leaders appeared wearing such items during public events, communities understood the messages being communicated. Symbolism transformed material objects into political language. Architecture contributed to this process as well. Elevated mounds, ceremonial buildings, plazas, and sacred spaces created environments where leadership could be displayed and reinforced. In societies such as the Natchez Chiefdom and Cahokia, rulers occupied positions physically elevated above ordinary spaces. This arrangement carried symbolic meaning. Height suggested proximity to sacred forces, visibility, and authority. Public ceremonies conducted atop mounds allowed communities to witness leadership within carefully designed settings. Architecture shaped perception. It transformed landscapes into stages upon which political and spiritual traditions unfolded. Ceremonial gatherings represented some of the most important moments within royal life. These events served multiple purposes simultaneously. They celebrated seasonal transitions, honored ancestors, reinforced alliances, distributed resources, and the ceremonies themselves belonged to the broader community. Participation created shared experiences strengthening collective identity. Through ritual, people reaffirmed commitments to traditions and relationships extending beyond individual interests. Leadership gained legitimacy because it remained embedded within communal life rather than isolated from it. Gift-giving frequently accompanied these gatherings. Across many indigenous cultures, generosity enhanced prestige. Leaders demonstrated authority not by accumulating wealth privately, but by distributing resources publicly. Valuable goods acquired through trade networks could be presented to allies, visitors, and community members. Such exchanges strengthened relationships while demonstrating the leader's ability to provide for others. Power became associated with generosity, responsibility, and social harmony. This principle distinguished many indigenous political traditions from later systems emphasizing accumulation and exclusivity. Religion and spirituality often reinforced royal traditions. Leaders participated in ceremonies connecting communities to sacred forces believed to influence the world. In some societies, rulers themselves possessed sacred status. In others, they worked closely with religious specialists. Regardless of specific arrangements, political authority and spiritual meaning frequently overlapped. Ceremonies helped maintain cosmic balance while supporting social order. Leadership therefore carried obligations, extending beyond practical governance. Rulers were expected to uphold traditions, preserve harmony, and fulfill responsibilities toward both the living community and the spiritual world. Public appearances formed another important aspect of royal life. Unlike modern political systems where communication may occur through documents or media, ancient leadership relied heavily upon direct visibility. Communities expected rulers to participate in ceremonies, gatherings, negotiations, and public events. Presence mattered. Seeing leaders perform responsibilities reinforced confidence in their authority. Public rituals therefore functioned partly as demonstrations of competence and legitimacy. Through repeated participation, rulers became familiar symbols of continuity and stability. Trade networks enhanced the prestige of leadership by providing access to rare materials and exotic goods. Items originating hundreds of miles away carried special significance because they represented connections extending beyond local communities. Leaders who controlled access to such goods demonstrated influence reaching across large territories. Exchange networks therefore supported both economic and political objectives. Prestige goods became tools for diplomacy, ceremony, and alliance building. As the afternoon light softens and preparations continue for an important ceremonial gathering, the deeper meaning of royal traditions becomes clear. These practices were not merely decorative or symbolic additions to political authority. They formed the foundation upon which authority rested. Ceremonies connected leaders to communities. Symbols communicated legitimacy. Architecture shaped perceptions. Ancestors provided continuity. Together, these elements transformed leadership into a cultural institution capable of enduring across generations. Long before European colonization introduced foreign political systems, the kingdoms and chiefdoms of North America had developed sophisticated traditions through which power was expressed, understood, and maintained. Their rulers governed not simply through command, but through participation in shared worlds of meaning that bound entire societies together. As evening approaches and ceremonial fires begin illuminating plazas, mountaintops, and gathering places throughout ancient America, we turn our attention to another important aspect of royal tradition, the responsibilities carried by those who held power. Modern discussions of kingship often focus upon privilege, wealth, and authority. Yet within many indigenous societies, leadership involved obligations just as significant as advantages. Rulers were expected to maintain stability, preserve traditions, strengthen alliances, oversee ceremonies, and ensure the well-being of their communities. Their legitimacy depended not only upon ancestry or symbolism, but also upon performance. Communities watched carefully. Leaders who failed to fulfill responsibilities risked losing influence. Understanding these expectations reveals why royal traditions proved so durable and why political authority often remained closely connected to social and spiritual responsibilities. Imagine a ruler preparing for an important seasonal ceremony. The event has been anticipated for months. Families have traveled from surrounding communities. Traders and visitors have arrived. Religious specialists have organized ritual activities. The success of the gathering depends partly upon leadership. The ruler must welcome guests, oversee distributions of food and gifts, participate in ceremonies, and ensure that traditions are followed appropriately. Every action carries symbolic significance. A successful event strengthens social bonds and reinforces confidence in leadership. A poorly managed gathering could damage prestige. Power therefore requires constant effort. Authority is not a possession stored away between ceremonies. It must be renewed repeatedly through visible service to the community. One of the most important responsibilities involved maintaining harmony. Communities contained individuals and groups with differing interests. Disputes inevitably emerged regarding resources, relationships, obligations, or political decisions. Leaders often acted as mediators, helping resolve conflicts before they threatened broader stability. Effective governance required patience, diplomacy, and communication, rather than relying solely upon coercion. Many indigenous political systems emphasized consensus building and relationship management. Leaders succeeded when they fostered cooperation. This approach reflected broader cultural values emphasizing interconnectedness and collective well-being. Diplomacy extended beyond local concerns. Kingdoms and chiefdoms existed within regional landscapes populated by neighboring societies. Alliances required maintenance. Trade relationships demanded attention. Rivalries needed careful management. Rulers frequently participated in negotiations involving marriage connections, gift exchanges, ceremonial partnerships, and political agreements. Through diplomacy, they expanded influence while reducing the likelihood of conflict. Successful leaders understood that long-term stability often depended upon relationships extending far beyond their own communities. Ceremonial obligations remained equally important. Public rituals reinforced cultural continuity and connected communities to ancestral traditions. Leaders occupied visible roles within these events because they represented the continuity of the social order itself. Their participation signaled commitment to shared values. Ceremonies, therefore, served political functions alongside spiritual ones. They reminded people that leadership existed within larger systems of meaning extending across generations. Every ritual linked past, present, and future. Resource management represented another critical responsibility. Agricultural societies depended preparation. Leaders often oversaw distributions of food and valuable goods, particularly during ceremonies or periods of hardship. Generosity enhanced prestige because it demonstrated concern for collective welfare. Communities expected leaders to use resources in ways benefiting the broader population. Hoarding wealth could undermine legitimacy. Sharing reinforced authority. This principle appears repeatedly throughout indigenous political traditions across North America. Warfare, although not constant, remained a possibility within many regions. Leaders needed the ability to protect communities when threats emerged. Military success could enhance prestige, but warfare carried risks as well. Wise rulers balanced strength with diplomacy. They sought solutions preserving stability whenever possible. The most successful leaders often demonstrated skill in avoiding unnecessary conflicts while remaining prepared to defend their people when required. Royal traditions helped communicate these responsibilities. Ceremonial regalia, public appearances, architecture, and ritual participation reminded communities of what leadership was supposed to represent. Symbols carried expectations. A ruler wearing prestigious ornaments was not simply displaying status. They were demonstrating commitment to the obligations associated with that status. Authority and responsibility remained intertwined. One of the most fascinating aspects of indigenous leadership concerns the relationship between power and community memory. Stories preserve the reputations of earlier rulers. Successful leaders became examples for future generations. Their actions were remembered, discussed, and incorporated into oral traditions. This historical memory created standards against which current leaders could be evaluated. Ancestral achievements therefore influenced contemporary politics. The past remained an active force shaping expectations in the present. European observers often misunderstood these systems because they interpreted them through familiar concepts of monarchy and nobility. While certain similarities existed, indigenous leadership operated according to different principles. Authority depended heavily upon relationships, reciprocity, ceremony, and cultural legitimacy. Rulers governed within social frameworks emphasizing obligations alongside privileges. Understanding this distinction is essential. It reminds us that political sophistication can take many forms. The kingdoms and chiefdoms of ancient America developed governance systems suited to their own histories, environments, and values. As darkness settles across the continent and ceremonial fires flicker beneath the stars, one can imagine leaders gathering with elders, religious specialists, and community members to discuss matters affecting the future. Decisions made in these moments influence alliances, ceremonies, trade relationships, and community welfare. Yet they also contribute to something larger: the preservation of traditions connecting generations. Royal authority endures because it is embedded within shared cultural worlds. It survives not through force alone, but through participation in systems of meaning accepted by the community. The rulers of Coosa, the Calusa Kingdom, the Powhatan Confederacy, the Natchez Chiefdom, and Cahokia all understood this reality. Their power rested upon more than military strength or economic resources. It depended upon ceremonies, symbols, responsibilities, and relationships carefully maintained across time. Long before European colonization transformed North America, these leaders governed through traditions that blended politics, spirituality, diplomacy, and community into unified systems of authority. Their stories reveal that America's forgotten kingdoms possessed rich political cultures, every bit as sophisticated as those found in many better-known civilizations around the world. And as the stars rise above ancient plazas and sacred mounds, their legacy continues to echo across the landscapes they once ruled. Chapter 3. Segment 1. Trade Networks and Diplomacy. Alliances across the continent. As the first light of dawn spreads across North America and illuminates rivers, forests, coastal waters, mountain valleys, and fertile plains, we begin to see a continent connected by far more than geography alone. Long before European arrival, long before colonial borders divided the landscape, and long before modern transportation networks reshaped movement across the continent. Indigenous societies maintained extensive systems of trade, diplomacy, communication, and alliance. These networks linked kingdoms, chiefdoms, confederacies, and independent communities across enormous distances. Goods moved from region to region. Ideas traveled alongside merchants and messengers. Ceremonial traditions spread through gatherings and exchanges. Political relationships formed, evolved, and sometimes dissolved. The forgotten kingdoms we have explored throughout this journey did not exist in isolation. Coosa, the Calusa Kingdom, the Powhatan Confederacy, the Natchez Chiefdom, and Cahokia all participated in broader worlds of interaction extending far beyond their immediate territories. Their leaders understood a fundamental truth about power. No kingdom thrives entirely alone. Influence depends not only upon internal strength, but also upon relationships with neighbors. To understand how these forgotten kingdoms survived and prospered, we must follow the routes that connected them to the wider continent and explore the diplomacy that transformed trade into political power. Imagine standing beside a major river sometime around the year 1300. Dawn mist rises from the water as canoes emerge from the distance. Travelers arrive carrying goods obtained hundreds of miles away. Shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, finely crafted stone tools, pottery, textiles, and ceremonial objects appear among the cargo. Yet these travelers carry more than physical goods. They also bring news, stories, knowledge, and information regarding political developments in distant regions. Every journey strengthens connections between communities. Rivers function as highways. Trails crossing forests and grasslands link settlements, separated by vast distances. Through these routes, North America becomes an interconnected world. One of the most remarkable aspects of indigenous trade networks is their scale. Archaeological discoveries reveal that materials often traveled extraordinary distances. Marine shells from the Gulf Coast appear in inland ceremonial centers. Copper originating near the Great Lakes reaches communities hundreds of miles away. Obsidian, stone, and other resources move across regional boundaries. Such patterns demonstrate the existence of exchange systems capable of connecting diverse societies throughout much of the continent. Participation in these networks enhanced prosperity while creating opportunities for diplomacy and alliance building. Leaders recognize the strategic importance of maintaining access to valuable resources. Trade, therefore, became a political tool as well as an economic activity. Cahokia provides one of the clearest examples of this relationship. At its height, the city occupied a central position within extensive exchange networks linking numerous regions. Goods arrived from distant communities and circulated through local markets and ceremonial exchanges. Leaders who controlled access to prestigious materials strengthened their authority while expanding influence beyond the city itself. Valuable items could be distributed during ceremonies, presented to allies, or used to reward supporters. Through trade, Cahokia transformed economic connections into political relationships. Similar patterns appear throughout the continent. The Kingdom of Coosa occupied a strategic position within southeastern exchange networks. Rivers flowing through its territory connected communities across large portions of the southeast. Leaders benefited from controlling access to important routes and resources. Trade enhanced prestige while facilitating diplomatic relationships with neighboring societies. Communities participating in exchange often developed Mutual interests encouraging cooperation. Economic interdependence reduced incentives for conflict and created opportunities for alliance building. The Calusa Kingdom offers another fascinating example. Situated along the waterways of southern Florida, the Calusa controlled coastal routes essential for regional exchange. Canoes transported goods between islands, estuaries, and mainland settlements. Marine resources themselves became important trade items. Leaders who managed access to these networks gained influence extending across much of the region. Geography provided advantages, but diplomacy transformed those advantages into lasting power. The Calusa understood that controlling movement and exchange strengthened political authority. Trade routes therefore functioned as extensions of governance. Diplomacy emerged naturally from these economic relationships. Communities engaged in regular exchange needed mechanisms for resolving disputes, establishing trust, and maintaining stability. Leaders met with one another, exchanged gifts, negotiated agreements, and participated in ceremonies reinforcing alliances. Diplomacy reduced uncertainty. It allowed neighboring societies to coordinate activities and respond collectively to challenges. Successful leaders often possessed skills extending beyond military capability. They understood negotiation, persuasion, and relationship building. Their influence depended partly upon their ability to maintain peaceful and productive interactions with others. Gift exchange occupied a particularly important role within many diplomatic traditions. Valuable goods carried symbolic meanings beyond their material worth. Presenting gifts demonstrated respect, goodwill, and commitment to ongoing relationships. Recipients often responded with gifts of their own, creating cycles of reciprocity strengthening social and political bonds. Such exchanges occurred during meetings between leaders, ceremonial gatherings, and important regional events. Through gift-giving, diplomacy became visible and tangible. Relationships were reinforced through actions rather than merely words. Ceremonial gatherings often served diplomatic purposes as well. Communities traveled considerable distances to participate in major events. Traders exchanged goods. Leaders discussed political matters. Families renewed relationships. Religious activities reinforced shared cultural values. These gatherings created environments where diplomacy could flourish naturally. Political alliances developed within broader contexts of social and ceremonial interaction. The boundaries between trade, religion, and politics frequently overlapped. Understanding indigenous diplomacy requires recognizing these connections. Marriage alliances further strengthened relationships between extending across regional boundaries. Such arrangements created networks of kinship supporting political cooperation. Marriage transformed distant communities into relatives, making conflict less desirable and collaboration more attractive. Through kinship, diplomacy became embedded within everyday social structures. These alliances could endure across generations, contributing to long-term stability. Information itself represented a valuable resource moving through trade and diplomatic networks. News regarding environmental conditions, harvests, conflicts, ceremonies, and leadership changes circulated widely. Messengers carried information between settlements. Travelers shared observations acquired during journeys. Leaders relied upon these communication systems when making decisions affecting their communities. Effective diplomacy required knowledge. Communities isolated from information faced disadvantages. Participation in exchange networks therefore enhanced political awareness alongside economic opportunity. As The morning advances and canoes continue arriving from distant regions carrying goods, stories, and messages. The interconnected nature of ancient America becomes increasingly apparent. The kingdoms and chiefdoms we have explored did not stand alone. They participated in complex systems linking diverse societies across vast distances. Through trade and diplomacy, leaders expanded influence, secured resources, and maintained stability. Their achievements remind us that North America before European colonization was not a collection of isolated communities. It was a dynamic continent connected by relationships stretching across rivers, forests, coastlines, and generations. The forgotten kingdoms thrived because they understood the power of connection, and through those connections they built worlds far larger than any single kingdom could have created alone. As the afternoon sun shines upon rivers crowded with canoes and trails busy with travelers, merchants, and messengers, we begin to understand that diplomacy was not simply a supplement to power. In many ways, it was power. The most successful kingdoms and chiefdoms of ancient America rarely depended solely upon force to achieve their goals. They relied upon carefully maintained relationships, strategic alliances, shared ceremonies, economic cooperation, and mutual obligations extending across vast regions. While warfare certainly occurred, long-term prosperity usually depended upon stability. Leaders who mastered diplomacy could expand influence without constant conflict, creating networks of cooperation benefiting entire communities. To appreciate this reality, imagine a gathering attended by representatives from several neighboring societies. The event takes place within a large ceremonial center. Traders display goods from distant regions. Musicians perform traditional songs. Religious ceremonies reinforce shared cultural values. Amid these activities, leaders meet privately to discuss matters affecting their communities. They negotiate access to resources. They address disputes before tensions escalate. They arrange future exchanges and strengthen existing alliances. Such gatherings reveal diplomacy in its most effective form. Political relationships emerge through repeated interaction rather than isolated agreements. Trust develops gradually over time. The Powhatan Confederacy provides a particularly illuminating example of diplomatic leadership. Before sustained European settlement reached the Chesapeake region, Powhatan leaders governed through a network of alliances connecting numerous communities. Their authority depended not upon direct control of every village, but upon relationships maintained through negotiation, reciprocity, and mutual benefit. Communities remained connected because participation offered advantages. Trade flourished. Security improved. Shared interests encouraged cooperation. Diplomacy allowed the Confederacy to expand influence while accommodating local diversity. This flexibility became one of its greatest strengths. The Kingdom of Coosa operated according to similar principles. Its leaders maintained influence across large portions of the southeastern woodlands through alliances linking numerous settlements. Rivers facilitated communication, but relationships sustained political authority. Leaders met with neighboring chiefs, participated in ceremonial gatherings, and coordinated activities affecting multiple communities. The success of Coosa demonstrates that diplomacy could be just as important as military capability when building regional power. Effective leaders recognized that cooperation often produced more lasting results than conquest. The Calusa kingdom illustrates another dimension of diplomatic strategy. Controlling coastal routes provided economic advantages, but maintaining those Advantages required careful relationship management. Neighboring societies possessed their own interests and capabilities. Trade networks function best when supported by stable political conditions. Calusa rulers therefore balanced strength with negotiation, ensuring that access to resources and transportation routes remained secure. Geography created opportunities, but diplomacy transformed those opportunities into lasting influence. Religious and ceremonial traditions often supported diplomatic efforts. Shared rituals created common ground between communities. Participation in regional ceremonies reinforced cultural connections while providing opportunities for political discussion. Leaders could strengthen alliances within environments emphasizing cooperation and mutual respect. Ceremonies, therefore, served both spiritual and political purposes. They reminded participants of shared values while facilitating practical decision-making. In many indigenous societies, diplomacy was not separated from cultural life. It was embedded within broader systems of meaning and relationship. Gift exchange remained one of the most powerful diplomatic tools available to leaders. Valuable items carried messages. A gift could express friendship, acknowledge obligations, celebrate alliances, or initiate new relationships. Because many prestigious goods traveled through extensive trade networks, their presentation demonstrated access to broader worlds of exchange. Leaders who distributed valuable items enhanced their own prestige while strengthening bonds with others. Generosity created influence. Communities remembered leaders who shared resources and supported collective well-being. Information networks played increasingly important roles as political systems grew more complex. Messengers traveled between settlements carrying news regarding environmental conditions, trade opportunities, ceremonies, and conflicts. Leaders who received timely information possessed significant advantages. They could anticipate challenges, coordinate responses, and make informed decisions. Communication, therefore, became a form of political power. Maintaining reliable information networks required trust and cooperation across large distances. Diplomacy helped sustain these connections. One fascinating aspect of indigenous diplomacy involves its adaptability. Political landscapes changed constantly. Alliances formed and dissolved. Environmental conditions shifted. New leaders emerged. Successful diplomatic systems accommodated these changes without collapsing. Flexibility allowed communities to respond effectively to uncertainty. Relationships could be renegotiated. New partnerships could develop. Existing agreements could evolve. This adaptability contributed significantly to the longevity of many indigenous political traditions. Yet diplomacy was not always successful. Conflicts occurred. Competition over resources sometimes produced tensions. Misunderstandings could damage relationships. Leaders occasionally faced difficult choices balancing local interests with broader regional concerns. The existence of diplomacy does not imply the absence of conflict. Rather, it demonstrates efforts to manage conflict in ways minimizing long-term damage. Even rival societies often maintain channels of communication allowing negotiations to continue during difficult periods. The arrival of Europeans introduced new challenges into these established systems. Foreign powers entered existing political landscapes without fully understanding indigenous diplomatic traditions. European assumptions regarding sovereignty, land ownership, and authority often differed significantly from indigenous perspectives. Misunderstandings became common. Yet indigenous leaders initially responded using familiar diplomatic tools. They negotiated, formed alliances, exchanged gifts, and evaluated newcomers. Within existing political frameworks, their actions reveal confidence in systems that had functioned successfully for generations. Archaeological evidence continues revealing the scale of these diplomatic worlds. Trade goods found far from their origins testify to extensive connections. Settlement patterns suggest cooperation between communities. Ceremonial centers indicate gathering places where relationships could be maintained. Historical accounts recorded by Europeans occasionally provide additional glimpses into diplomatic practices already well established before contact. Together, these sources reveal a continent connected by sophisticated networks of alliance and communication. As evening approaches and travelers prepare to continue their journeys along rivers and trails stretching across North America, we can appreciate the remarkable achievements of the leaders who built and maintained these networks. Their kingdoms and chiefdoms prospered not simply because they possessed resources or military strength, but because they understood the importance of relationships. Through diplomacy, they transformed geography into connection, trade into alliance, and communication into influence. Long before modern diplomatic institutions emerged, the rulers of ancient America developed sophisticated systems for managing political relationships across vast territories. Their success reminds us that power often grows strongest not through domination, but through cooperation. And in the worlds of America's forgotten kingdoms, diplomacy was among the greatest tools of all. Chapter 3. Segment 2. Warfare and Political Rivalries. Defending Kingdoms and Territories. As the morning mist slowly lifts from river valleys, forests, coastal waterways, and fertile agricultural lands across ancient North America, another reality of political life comes into view. Throughout our journey, we have explored diplomacy, trade networks, ceremonial traditions, sacred leadership, and the alliances that helped kingdoms and chiefdoms prosper. Yet no political system exists in a world entirely free from conflict. Wherever communities possess resources, territory, influence, and competing interests, disagreements eventually emerge. Ancient America was no exception. The forgotten kingdoms of Coosa, the Calusa, the Powhatan Confederacy, the Natchez, and the rulers of the Mississippian world all inhabited landscapes shaped not only by cooperation but also by rivalry. Leaders negotiated alliances, but they also prepared defenses. They exchanged gifts, but they monitored threats. They sought stability, yet they understood that stability often required readiness. Warfare in ancient North America was complex, varied, and deeply influenced by local cultures and environments. It was rarely a matter of endless conquest or permanent armies in the way modern audiences often imagine. Instead, conflict emerged from specific circumstances involving territory, resources, prestige, trade routes, political influence, and the need to protect communities. To understand these forgotten kingdoms fully, we must examine how they defended themselves, managed rivalries, and navigated a world where power often depended upon both diplomacy and strength. Imagine standing at the edge of a fortified settlement somewhere in the southeast around the year 1400. Wooden palisades surround the community. Watchful eyes scan nearby forests. Farmers work fields beyond the walls, but pathways leading into the settlement are carefully monitored. Such scenes reveal an important truth. The presence of defenses does not necessarily indicate constant warfare. Rather, it reflects preparation. Communities invested considerable effort into protecting themselves because leaders understood that threats could arise unexpectedly. Archaeological evidence throughout North America reveals fortified settlements, defensive earthworks, and strategically positioned villages. These features suggest that conflict, while not continuous, remained an important consideration. The reasons for conflict varied significantly. Agricultural societies depended upon access to fertile land. Trade networks relied upon control of important routes. Political leaders sought influence among neighboring communities. Population growth sometimes increased competition for resources. Environmental changes could place additional pressure upon relationships already strained by existing rivalries. In such circumstances, diplomacy often served as the first line of defense. Leaders attempted negotiation, alliance building, and compromise. Yet when these efforts failed, conflict could follow. Understanding warfare requires recognizing that it existed within broader political systems rather than separate from them. The kingdom of Coosa likely faced challenges from neighboring powers competing for influence within the southeast. Rivers that facilitated trade also created strategic corridors through which rivals could travel. Maintaining authority over multiple communities required demonstrating the ability to protect allies and defend territory. Leaders therefore balanced diplomacy with military preparedness. The very existence of a large regional kingdom suggests success in managing these pressures. Communities were more likely to remain loyal when they believed leadership could ensure security. The Calusa kingdom confronted a different strategic environment. Southern Florida's waterways provided both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Control of coastal routes brought wealth and influence, but it also attracted attention. Rival groups might seek access to resources or challenge territorial claims. Fortunately for the Calusa, their deep knowledge of coastal geography offered significant advantages. Navigating mangrove channels, estuaries, and shallow waters required expertise unavailable to outsiders. Canoes allowed rapid movement. Familiarity with local conditions enhanced defensive capabilities. Geography itself became a strategic asset, supporting political power. The Powhatan Confederacy offers one of the clearest examples of how warfare and diplomacy intersected. Powhatan leaders governed through alliances connecting numerous communities. Maintaining such a confederacy required balancing competing interests while responding to external threats. Military capability reinforced political authority because communities expected leaders to provide protection. Yet warfare alone could not sustain the alliance. Relationships depended equally upon negotiation and reciprocity. Successful leadership required knowing when to seek peace and when to demonstrate strength. This balance proved essential to the Confederacy's longevity. Within the broader Mississippian world, competition sometimes emerged between regional centers seeking influence over trade networks and surrounding communities, monumental construction projects, and ceremonial centers communicated power, but they also reflected political ambitions. Leaders competed not only through warfare but through displays of prestige, economic success, and ceremonial authority. Rivalries therefore operated across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Conflict represented one possible outcome, but influence could also be expanded through trade, alliances, and cultural leadership. Archaeological evidence reveals traces of these dynamics. Fortifications, weapons, settlement relocations, and patterns of destruction occasionally suggest periods of tension. Yet it is important to avoid assuming that warfare dominated everyday life. Most people spent far more than engaging in combat. Conflict occurred intermittently rather than continuously. The goal of most leaders was stability because prosperity depended upon secure conditions. Warfare generally represented a disruption rather than a normal state of existence. Military organization varied considerably across regions. Ancient North American societies typically did not maintain large, permanent armies comparable to those of later empires. Instead, communities mobilized warriors when circumstances required. Participation often reflected social obligations and cultural traditions. Leadership during conflict could involve experienced warriors, political authorities, or combinations of both. Success depended upon knowledge of terrain, coordination, and community support. Familiarity with local environments frequently provided decisive advantages. Forests, rivers, mountains, and coastlines shaped military strategies as much as political considerations did. Cultural values also influenced attitudes toward warfare. In many societies, courage, responsibility, and protection of the community were highly respected qualities. Warriors often occupied important social positions, yet warfare rarely existed solely for personal glory. It served broader political purposes linked to community welfare. Leaders who exposed people to unnecessary risks could damage their legitimacy. Military decisions therefore carried significant responsibilities. Effective rulers understood that protecting communities involved careful judgment rather than aggression alone. As the day progresses and life continues throughout villages, towns, and ceremonial centers across the continent, the role of conflict becomes clearer. Warfare formed one part of a larger political landscape shaped equally by diplomacy, trade, religion, and social relationships. The forgotten kingdoms survived because their leaders mastered multiple forms of power. They negotiated alliances when possible and defended communities when necessary. Their success depended not upon endless conquest, but upon the ability to balance strength with stability. Long before European colonization transformed North America, indigenous leaders had developed sophisticated approaches to managing rivalry and conflict within complex political worlds. As afternoon sunlight stretches across fortified villages, river crossings, ceremonial centers, and coastal strongholds, we begin to understand that the greatest challenge facing many rulers was not winning a single conflict, but maintaining stability after conflict ended. Warfare could change boundaries, alter alliances, and influence reputations, but lasting political power required something more enduring. Leaders needed to preserve relationships, rebuild trust, protect trade networks, and ensure that communities could continue prospering. The forgotten kingdoms of ancient America survived for generations not because they were constantly at war, but because their leaders understood how to manage the consequences of rivalry. Power depended upon resilience, adaptability, and the ability to restore balance when tensions threatened social order. Imagine a regional leader receiving reports from messengers arriving by canoe and footpath. News has spread that a neighboring group is dissatisfied with existing agreements regarding trade, access, or territorial boundaries. Such situations demanded careful attention. Immediate military action was rarely the only option. Leaders gathered advisors, consulted allies, and considered potential consequences. Decisions affected not only warriors but farmers, traders, families, and neighboring communities whose lives depended upon stability. Political leadership, therefore, involved strategic thinking extending far beyond the battlefield. One of the most important tools available to rulers was alliance building. Alliances provided security by ensuring that communities did not face challenges alone. Through marriage connections, ceremonial partnerships, trade agreements, and diplomatic relationships, leaders created networks capable of responding collectively to threats. These alliances often proved more valuable than military victories because they reduced the likelihood of conflict occurring in the first place. A powerful alliance could discourage rivals from taking aggressive actions. It could also provide support during periods of crisis. The kingdom of Coosa likely benefited significantly from such arrangements. Governing a large territory required cooperation among numerous communities. Alliances strengthened political cohesion while increasing collective security. Communities connected through shared interests were more capable of responding effectively to external pressures. Similar patterns appeared throughout the Southeast and beyond. Leaders invested substantial effort in maintaining relationships because those relationships formed the foundation of political stability. The Calusa kingdom demonstrates how environmental advantages and alliances could work together. Control of coastal routes enhanced economic influence, but maintaining that influence required cooperation with communities occupying strategic locations. Trade partnerships, ceremonial relationships, and diplomatic agreements helped secure access to resources and transportation networks. Geography alone could not guarantee security. Human relationships transformed environmental advantages into lasting political power. The Powhatan Confederacy provides another instructive example. Before extensive European settlement altered the region, Powhatan leaders maintained authority through a combination of diplomacy, reciprocity, and strategic strength. Communities remained connected because participation offered benefits. Security, trade opportunities, and political stability encouraged cooperation. Military capability reinforced the Confederacy's position, but diplomacy sustained it. Leaders who balanced these elements effectively could preserve influence across large territories. Ceremonial traditions often played important roles in restoring harmony after periods of tension. Public gatherings brought communities together, allowing relationships to be renewed through shared experiences. Rituals emphasized common identities and collective values. Gift exchanges demonstrated goodwill. Leaders used these occasions to reaffirm alliances and communicate intentions. Ceremony therefore functioned as a political tool supporting peace as well as spiritual life. The integration of diplomacy, religion, and social interaction helped many societies recover from conflict more effectively than would otherwise have been possible. Trade networks also encouraged stability. Communities benefiting from exchange possessed incentives to avoid prolonged disruptions. Merchants, artisans, and leaders all gained advantages from peaceful conditions supporting movement and communication. Economic interdependence, therefore, contributed to political moderation. Leaders recognized that warfare threatening major trade routes could damage prosperity for everyone involved. This understanding often encouraged negotiation even when disagreements emerged. Yet not all conflicts could be resolved peacefully. Environmental pressures sometimes intensified competition. Droughts, crop failures, population shifts, and changing resource availability created challenges requiring difficult decisions. Leaders faced the task of protecting communities while avoiding unnecessary escalation. Success depended upon flexibility and judgment. Political systems capable of adapting to changing circumstances generally proved more resilient than those relying solely upon force. 1. Fascinating aspect of indigenous political traditions involves the importance of reputation. Communities remembered the actions of leaders. Stories preserved examples of wise diplomacy, courageous defense, generosity, and poor decision-making. Reputation influenced future relationships because neighboring societies paid attention to past behavior. Leaders known for fairness and reliability often found it easier to build alliances. Those associated with unnecessary aggression could face distrust. Political authority, therefore, depended partly upon maintaining positive reputations over time. This emphasis on memory encouraged responsible leadership. The arrival of Europeans introduced new dimensions to existing rivalries. Foreign powers entered political landscapes already shaped by alliances and conflicts. Indigenous leaders initially approached these newcomers using familiar diplomatic frameworks. They negotiated, formed partnerships, exchanged gifts, and assessed potential advantages. Yet European colonial ambitions, unfamiliar diseases, and rapidly changing power dynamics created challenges unlike those previously encountered. Existing systems proved remarkably adaptable in many cases, but the scale of transformation eventually exceeded anything earlier leaders had faced. Understanding this later history highlights the sophistication of pre-contact political traditions. Indigenous rulers responded creatively to uncertainty because they inherited centuries of experience managing complex relationships. Archaeological evidence continues revealing the resilience of these systems. Settlement patterns show communities adapting to changing circumstances. Trade goods indicate ongoing exchange despite occasional disruptions. Fortifications coexist with evidence of cooperation and ceremonial interaction. Together, these findings paint a nuanced picture. Ancient America was neither a world of perpetual peace nor one of constant warfare. It was a continent where leaders navigated complex political realities using combinations of diplomacy, alliance building, trade, ceremony, and strategic strength. As evening approaches and the sounds of daily life echo across villages, towns, and ceremonial centers, we can appreciate the achievements of those who governed America's forgotten kingdoms. Their success did not depend solely upon military victories. It depended upon the ability to maintain stability in uncertain environments, to transform rivals into partners when possible, and to protect communities without sacrificing the relationships upon which long-term prosperity depended. Long before modern political institutions emerged, indigenous leaders had developed sophisticated methods for balancing conflict and cooperation. Their kingdoms endured because they understood a timeless lesson of governance. True power is measured not only by the ability to win conflicts, but by the ability to build lasting peace afterward. Chapter 3. Segment 3. The Decline of America's Forgotten Kingdoms. The Arrival of a New Era. As the sun begins to sink toward the horizon and long shadows stretch across the rivers, forests, coastal waters, and ancient ceremonial centers of North America, our journey through America's forgotten kingdoms approaches its final chapter. For centuries, the powerful societies we have explored governed vast territories, maintained trade networks, organized ceremonies, built alliances, and shaped the lives of countless people. The kingdom of Coosa flourished across the southeastern woodlands. The Calusa commanded the waterways of southern Florida. The Powhatan Confederacy united dozens of communities along the Atlantic coast. The Natchez preserved sacred traditions rooted in ancient Mississippian beliefs. Cahokia rose into one of the greatest cities ever built north of Mexico. These societies did not appear suddenly, nor did they vanish overnight. Their histories unfolded across generations through adaptation, innovation, cooperation, and resilience. Yet eventually, each faced challenges that transformed the political landscape of North America. Understanding their decline requires setting aside the idea that civilizations disappear because of a single dramatic event. In reality, historical change is usually more complex. Environmental shifts, demographic pressures, political rivalries, economic transformations, disease, and foreign contact all contributed to the gradual reshaping of indigenous worlds. The story of decline is therefore not simply a story of endings. It is also a story of adaptation, survival, and transition into a new era. Imagine standing atop a great ceremonial mound sometime in the late 15th century. The world appears much as it has for generations. Fields stretch across fertile valleys. Traders move along rivers. Ceremonies continue according to established traditions. Communities remain connected through alliances and exchange networks. Yet beneath this appearance of continuity, subtle changes are already underway. Some regional centers have begun losing influence. Trade patterns are shifting. Environmental conditions may be placing new pressures on agricultural systems. Political relationships are evolving. None of these changes seem catastrophic individually, but together, they contribute to larger transformations unfolding across the continent. Cahokia provides one of the earliest examples of such change. By the 14th century, the city that once stood as north, debating the precise causes. Environmental pressures may have affected agriculture. Population density may have strained local resources. Political tensions could have weakened central authority. Changes in trade networks may have reduced economic influence. Whatever the combination of factors, the result was clear. The city gradually lost its position as the dominant center of the Mississippian world. Yet it is important to note that Cahokia's decline did not mean the disappearance of its people or traditions. Communities adapted. Populations dispersed. Cultural practices continued in new forms and new locations. The city declined, but the civilization endured. Similar patterns occurred elsewhere. The kingdom of Coosa remained influential for centuries, but maintaining authority over large territories required constant effort. Political systems depend upon relationships. Alliances must be renewed. Communities must continue perceiving benefits from participation. Environmental challenges, shifting trade routes, and regional rivalries could all affect these relationships. Over time, some political structures became less stable. Influence fluctuated. Leadership adapted to changing circumstances. Such transformations were part of normal historical processes occurring long before European arrival. The Calusa kingdom demonstrates another dimension of change. Its power depended heavily upon control of coastal resources and transportation networks. For generations, environmental knowledge allowed Calusa leaders to maintain influence across southern Florida. Yet coastal societies often face unique vulnerabilities. Changes in resource availability, severe weather events, and demographic shifts can alter political balances. Adaptation remained essential. The Calusa survived numerous challenges through resilience and flexibility, but later developments introduced pressures unlike those previously encountered. The Natchez chiefdom preserved sacred traditions connecting leadership, ceremony, and social organization. Yet even societies, rooted deeply in spiritual continuity, faced practical challenges. Population changes, political competition, and evolving regional conditions required constant adjustment. Sacred authority could provide legitimacy, but leaders still needed to respond effectively to material realities, affecting community well-being. The ability to balance tradition and adaptation became increasingly important as circumstances changed. One of the most significant forces influencing these transformations involved environmental variability. Climate patterns affect agriculture, resource availability, transportation, and settlement stability. Droughts can reduce crop yields. Floods may damage infrastructure. Shifting ecological conditions alter hunting, fishing, and gathering opportunities. Indigenous societies possessed considerable experience adapting to environmental change, but prolonged challenges could still create difficulties. Leaders responded through migration, innovation, alliance building, and other strategies. Yet adaptation itself often transformed political structures. Communities facing new realities rarely remain unchanged. Trade networks also evolved over time. Routes that once supported powerful regional centers sometimes shifted as populations moved and economic priorities changed. Communities occupying strategic locations could gain influence while others lost importance. Political authority often depended partly upon access to exchange systems. Changes in trade, therefore, carried political consequences. Leaders needed to adjust continually to maintain relevance within dynamic regional landscapes. Throughout all these transformations, indigenous societies demonstrated remarkable resilience. They adapted repeatedly to changing circumstances. They preserved traditions while embracing necessary innovations. They maintained communities despite challenges. This resilience is essential to understanding the history of America's forgotten kingdoms. Decline did not mean passivity. It involved active responses to complex conditions. Then, toward the end of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th, a new factor entered the story. Across the Atlantic Ocean, European exploration expanded into regions previously unknown to those undertaking the voyages. Initial contact occurred unevenly across the continent. Some communities encountered Europeans relatively early. Others remained unaffected for generations. Yet even before direct meetings became common, indirect consequences began spreading through trade networks and population movements. A new era was beginning, though few people could yet comprehend the scale of change that would follow. As evening settles across the landscapes once ruled by powerful kingdoms and chiefdoms, the world remains recognizably indigenous. Leaders govern communities. Ceremonies continue. Trade networks function. Families cultivate fields and raise children. Yet the horizon now contains possibilities and uncertainties unlike any previously experienced. The age of America's forgotten kingdoms has not ended, but it is entering a period of transformation that will reshape the continent in profound ways. As darkness slowly spreads across the rivers and forests of North America and the stars emerge above ancient landscapes, we arrive at one of the most consequential transitions in the continent's history. The kingdoms and chiefdoms we have explored throughout this journey were products of centuries of indigenous innovation, leadership, diplomacy, and adaptation. They had survived environmental fluctuations, political rivalries, and social change. Yet the arrival of Europeans, every community immediately, nor did they produce identical outcomes everywhere. The process unfolded gradually, unevenly, and often unpredictably. Nevertheless, the cumulative impact transformed the political world of ancient America. To understand the decline of these forgotten kingdoms, we must examine not only what was lost, but also what endured. Imagine a leader within one of these societies receiving reports of unfamiliar visitors appearing along distant coasts or traveling through neighboring territories. At first, the newcomers represent curiosity rather than catastrophe. They possess unfamiliar technologies, animals, materials, and customs. Trade opportunities seem possible. Alliances might be negotiated. Information remains incomplete. No one yet understands how profoundly these encounters will reshape the future. Indigenous leaders approached the situation using the tools that had served them for generations: diplomacy, strategic thinking, alliance building, and careful observation. They evaluate newcomers within existing political frameworks. In many cases, their responses are pragmatic and sophisticated. Yet some of the most devastating consequences of contact arrive invisibly. Disease represents perhaps the most significant factor in the transformation of indigenous political systems. For thousands of years, populations in the Americas had developed separately from those in Europe, Asia, and Africa. As a result, many diseases common in the Old World were entirely unfamiliar in North America. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and other illnesses spread through populations lacking prior exposure and immunity. The effects were catastrophic. Communities experienced sudden and severe population losses. Entire villages sometimes disappeared. Elders carrying historical knowledge died unexpectedly. Political leaders were lost. Social networks weakened. The demographic consequences affected nearly every aspect of society. Importantly, these outbreaks often occurred before direct European settlement reached particular regions. Diseases traveled along existing trade and communication networks, moving faster than colonists themselves. The impact on political systems was immense. Leadership depends upon continuity. Alliances depend upon relationships. Traditions depend upon knowledge transmission. When populations decline rapidly, these foundations become more difficult to maintain. Kingdoms such as Coosa, the Calusa realm, and the Natchez chiefdom faced challenges unlike any encountered previously. Leaders attempted to respond, but the scale of disruption proved extraordinary. Yet even amid these difficulties, indigenous communities demonstrated resilience. Families preserved traditions. New leaders emerged. Alliances adapted. Survival itself became an act of resistance. European colonization introduced additional pressures. Settlements expanded. Competition for land intensified. Trade relationships increasingly favored colonial powers. Military conflicts became more frequent in some regions. Indigenous leaders navigated these developments using strategies refined over generations. They formed alliances, negotiated agreements, resisted encroachments, and adapted political structures. Some communities temporarily strengthened their positions by aligning with particular European powers. Others sought isolation. Still others combined multiple approaches. There was no single indigenous response because there was no single indigenous experience. Diversity remained a defining characteristic of North America. The Powhatan Confederacy illustrates both the possibilities and challenges of this period. Early interactions with English colonists involved diplomacy and trade. Powhatan leaders attempted to incorporate newcomers into existing political frameworks. Yet differing assumptions regarding authority, land, and sovereignty created tensions. As colonial populations expanded, maintaining balance became increasingly difficult. Similar dynamics appeared elsewhere across the continent. Indigenous leaders understood diplomacy, but they faced opponents whose long-term objectives often differed fundamentally from their own. Economic changes further altered political landscapes. Traditional trade networks adapted to incorporate European goods, including metal, tools, firearms, cloth, and other materials. While such items could provide advantages, they also transformed existing relationships. Access to European trade became a new source of power and competition. Political systems evolved in response. Some leaders successfully leveraged these changes. Others struggled as older patterns of exchange weakened. Adaptation remained constant, but adaptation itself produced new realities. The Calusa kingdom offers a striking example of resilience followed by transformation. For generations, Calusa leaders used environmental knowledge and strategic geography to maintain independence. They resisted colonial pressures more effectively than many neighboring societies. Yet over time, disease, conflict, and expanding European influence gradually weakened the foundations supporting their political system. Similar processes affected numerous indigenous kingdoms and chiefdoms across the continent. It is tempting to describe these developments solely as decline, but such a description remains incomplete. Political structures changed. Certain kingdoms disappeared. Some ceremonial centers were abandoned. Yet indigenous peoples themselves did not vanish. Communities survived. Traditions adapted. Languages continued to be spoken. Cultural identities persisted despite extraordinary challenges. Descendants of the societies we have explored remain present today, preserving histories stretching back centuries before European arrival. Their continued existence represents one of the most important parts of this story. The legacy of America's forgotten kingdoms therefore extends beyond archaeology. It lives within contemporary indigenous nations, oral traditions, cultural practices, and historical memory. The rulers of Coosa, the Calusa Kingdom, the Powhatan Confederacy, the Natchez Chiefdom, and the leaders of Cahokia governed worlds that shaped the continent long before colonial powers arrived. Their achievements influenced trade, diplomacy, architecture, agriculture, and governance across vast regions. They demonstrated that sophisticated political systems flourished throughout North America. As our journey comes to an end and the night sky stretches above ancient rivers, forests, and ceremonial landscapes, we can reflect upon the remarkable civilizations that once ruled these lands. Their kingdoms may have changed. Their capitals may have faded into the earth. Their political structures may have transformed, but their stories remain. They remind us that North America before European colonization was a continent of leaders, diplomats, builders, traders, and visionaries whose achievements deserve to be remembered. The age of America's forgotten kingdoms eventually gave way to a new era, yet their legacy continues to echo across the landscape, waiting for those willing to listen. And so, our journey through America's forgotten kingdoms comes to an end. Tonight, we've traveled through powerful realms that once ruled vast regions of North America. From the kingdom of Coosa and the Calusa of Florida's coast, to the Powhatan Confederacy, the Natchez Chiefdom, and the great leaders of Cahokia. We've explored their trade networks, royal traditions, diplomacy, conflicts, and the challenges that eventually transformed their worlds. Though many of these kingdoms faded from history, their achievements, cultures, and legacies continue to live on through archaeology, indigenous traditions, and the stories they left behind. If you enjoyed this relaxing journey into the forgotten past, please consider subscribing. It truly helps support the channel and allows us to continue exploring more lost civilizations, ancient mysteries, and hidden chapters of history together. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until our next journey, rest well, sleep peacefully, and let the echoes of ancient history carry you gently into the night. Good night.